Oops. Yes, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second day of the 17th Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. My name is Nigel Casimir. I'm Telecommunications Specialist with the CTU Secretariat based in Port of Spain, Trinidad. Yes, so you just got the recording in progress message. So we are really in getting off to our day's proceedings now. Just 1 second, please. Yes, the provisional agenda for our CIGF is posted on the CTU website. There is the CTU webpage. Hopefully, you would be able to easily find it as you navigate there. And the link for the provisional agenda would also be posted in the chat. We'll be having a few presentations today again. And as you post your questions in the chat box, in order for them to be easily seen, we ask or suggest that you begin you're typing your questions with the word question or with QU, the words QU at the beginning of them so that they can easily be picked out from all the other comments that might be on the chat. And remember, when you're using the chat, ensure that it is addressed to the correct place, so to everyone or to any specific person you want to send it to. In terms of your name as it appears here on the Zoom list, please ensure that you've put your full name and, if possible, even add on your short organization name so that we can understand where you might, if you're representing a particular organization or group. The presentation slides would be posted up to our CTU event page at the end of each day. There'll be opportunities for verbal interventions, and at that time, we'll be asking you to, or you are asked to use the raise hand feature on the Zoom. You will find that by clicking the reactions button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Right, so actually, as I said, we are on our second day of the 17th CIGF. I just need to remind us in terms of what we would have gone through yesterday. And on that first day, we really had greetings from our supportive internet organizations in the Caribbean, ICANN, ARIN, LACNIC, and ISOC, as well as greetings as well from the UN's IGF Secretariat based in Switzerland. We had the head of office, Mr. Chengetai Masango, as well as a further presentation on some details of the upcoming 16th UN IGF in December in Katowice in Poland. From that presentation was made by Ms. Ania Genko. We had also reports from our regional Internet Governance Forum, in particular from Trinidad and Tobago IGF and from the St. Vincent and the Grenadines IGF. And additional supportive information from Kevin Swift of LACNIC and Tracy Hackshaw from TTIGF on inputs that can be made to the UN IGF upcoming, particularly related to work of the Dynamic Coalition on Small Island Development States, and also on a plan to create within the UN IGF a LAC space, a space for Latin America and Caribbean, issues. In the afternoon yesterday, we actually had two workshops. One focused on the Caribbean Internet Policy Internet Governance Policy Forum, framework, not forum. Internet Governance Policy Framework. That's the document that we have compiled from the work of this same CIGF over its 16 to 17-year history. In doing so, we did focus on the main priority areas, the 6 main priority areas, and started getting some specific feedback from the CIGF collection who were present yesterday on that. Very important to note as well is that we, I don't want to say introduced, but certainly reminded folks of the existence on the CTU website of an online discussion forum. There is a specific online discussion forum for internet governance matters. And in that forum, there are different discussion threads, one of which is specifically related to this Internet Governance Policy Framework document. So you are invited to register yourself on the forum on the website so that you can submit comments and inputs to the updating of the policy framework document. We ended off yesterday with a discussion among the internet organizations in the Caribbean, the ICANN, LACNIC, ARIN, and ISOC, on enhancing Caribbean internet research data and measurement for development. So we talked about how maybe we could make available to researchers in the Caribbean and policymakers in the Caribbean current, updated statistics and other general data about the state of the internet in the Caribbean. And they talked about plans in train to start issuing more Caribbean-specific data from as early as fourth quarter of 2021, and then on a progressive schedule thereafter. So we found out a good few things yesterday about developments in train, and today we are going to hear this morning on a matter that was mentioned a few times yesterday. How do we improve connectivity in the Caribbean? We are going to have the first session this morning is going to address issues of affordable and meaningful connectivity. And this issue of meaningful connectivity is a concept that has been specifically championed by a group called the Alliance for Affordable Internet, or A4AI. And A4AI is an organization that the CTU recently formed a collaborative arrangement with. We signed an MOU to work together for the development of the internet use and reach in the Caribbean specifically, because that's the CTU's focus. But A4AI is works globally, and they have researchers around the world working together in this area of affordable and meaningful connectivity. So we'll be privileged to hear from A4AI this morning in the first session. And they've lined up really 4 presenters for us. I'll just introduce them. So they will be presenting their innovative policy proposals for us to consider when we are developing our strategies for inclusive digital development. The presenters are led by Mr. Yassine Keladi. And Yassine is the coordinator for Latin America and the Caribbean for A4AI. And he'll be supported by 3 of his colleagues. One is Ana Maria Rodriguez, and she is a research analyst. She'll be talking about affordable, meaningful connectivity and device availability. He'll also have Ms. Muthoni Murithi. She will present a framework for mainstreaming gender in digital policy. And Ms. Natalia Podish, she will be giving us a preview of some of their latest research on universal service funds. So I see Yassine present, and I see they seem to be all set and raring to go. So Yassine, I'll introduce you now. Go ahead, and you will manage and introduce your colleagues at the appropriate time. So
yes,
Yassine, the floor is yours.
Hi everyone. Thank you very much, Nigel, and thanks to the CTU and the Caribbean IGF organizers to manage for us to have this space to present a few ideas and discuss their relevance and their usefulness for the Caribbean stakeholders, which I'm part of since at least 25 years. Yes, so the idea today is that we're gonna browse a few of our latest proposals, research results, findings, and policy recommendations in several areas. So I hope with my 3 colleagues we can do that in about 40 minutes, or a bit less, to look very quickly. All the information, of course, is available online. We have a lot of reports and things we will be pointing at, and then have some discussion, basically hear from the participants here how much these recommendations, tools, methodologies, or proposals are useful and could be, and how they could be adopted and adapted to their Caribbean realities, nationally and regionally. That's the idea of this session. And I want to add that today, I mean, this is, I already been participating in the Caribbean IGF, but this is the first time that we're doing that in the framework of CTU having joined the alliance, and when we have signed an MOU, an agreement, and collaboration agreement. So CTU is now a full member of the Alliance for Affordable Internet. And I hope that is gonna reap us benefits for the Caribbean, where we will be able to work more closely with Caribbean stakeholders to implement, adapt and adopt these proposals, and also learn from the Caribbean experiences and best practices. So the agenda, we already done some team introductions, so I'm not going to take time for that. I'm going to do a quick overview of what we do at F4AI. I believe not everyone is familiar with F4AI. So I'm going to present what we do globally. We're going to overview a few of the latest proposals, the Affordability Report 2020, the new affordability targets that we are advocating at the global level, meaningful connectivity. Last year, we already presented to the Caribbean in a couple of webinars, but I think it was limited number of persons who are become acquainted, but this is taking more and more importance in policy making in all over the world. Several countries are already integrating in their digital agendas and connectivity plans this concept. So we're going to look a little bit more. We have developed a new tool for measuring it. That is a survey tool that goes with the household surveys that ITU recommends. Anna is going to talk about that, and also about the device affordability report. Muthoni is going to walk us through the latest research and policy recommendations of the Women Rights Online Network, which is around how to mainstreaming gender into digital policy, and why is it important and how to do it. And Natalia is going to talk about an ongoing research that is about to be published in a few days on universal service funds. And I know that they've been working, they have included several Caribbean countries in the research. So I think some of the preliminary findings will be very interesting for this audience. And also going to mention key elements of the rural broadband policy framework, knowing that we expect to have a workshop for policymakers and regulators together with UCTU in the last quarter of this year to work on that more in depth. So, okay. So I'm going straight. I suggest, yes, that we write questions. If you have questions and remarks, we can either wait at the end of the session when we're going to do the discussion, or if you want to just put the questions there, both CTU team and my team will be looking at that so we can, get the answers or open a discussion on the issues that you are going to raise on the chat. So what is the Alliance for Affordable Internet? We like to say that we are the broadest technology sector alliance. We have about 100 members who are working together to this goal of lowering the cost of broadband to achieve universal, affordable, and meaningful connectivity or access. And how we do that transforming policy and regulatory frameworks. As I said, and you see here, I put it in the center, CTU is one of our latest members. Welcome CTU to the Alliance. And I hope this is going to be a great partnership for the region. So we have universities, private businesses, governments, research institutions, all of that conforming the Alliance that have endorsed also a set of good practices. I'm not going to go through these principles and good practices, just so you know that it includes at its core the principles of internet freedom, of rights of expressions, association, and a set of other key elements that, in fact, we reflect in our research and proposals. I'm not going to go through all those. They are here in the presentation and you will be able to browse it. They are also on our website. Just to say that the Alliance for Affordable Internet is coordinated or hosted by the World Wide Web Foundation, which has been created by Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the web. And it's part of its core missions to deliver digital equality and have everyone connected to everything all the time and everywhere. We have three main streams of work. One is research, one is country engagement, and one is advocacy. For the advocacy, you might know that today, when we talk about affordability, the proposal is what we call the 142. So the reference for defining if the country is affordable or not, if broadband is affordable in a country, is the 1 gigabyte entry package available for 30 days that should be no more than 2% of the average income. And that is a proposal made by A4AI that had made his way to the Broadband Commission and that is now accepted all over the world as the affordability threshold. And I'm going to talk a little bit further down this presentation about how we are already proposing to raise the bar of the 142 and we are proposing the 125. Other elements of our policy advocacy, like the good practices, the broadband framework, the COVID recommendations, all of that we're pushing in international forums at the Broadband Commission, the ITU, with the World Bank, the regional organizations, the UN regional commissions, and at the country level. In terms of research, we have a very abundant set of research products that you can also browse in our website. That goes from, of course, our flagship report, that is the affordability report. We have recently published something on sustainable research on sustainable access. That's the impact on broadband deployment on the environment and how to lower the carbon footprint of broadband expansion. We have research about mobile quality of service in low and middle income countries, about the device, about gender impact, about the impact of taxation, about how banks can develop plans to close the digital gap, etc. So a lot of these are published in the website together with the ITU. This year we have published the 2020 prize baskets. It's a new development and we have partnered with ITU to publish this. It's available both on our site and ITU website. And you can see that we have information about different kind of prices related to mobile and to fixed broadband also. And you can browse on our website. You see on the bottom of this slide you can go to the website and then also find that information related to the income and for the different packages of mobile broadband. So that's the mobile broadband data set that we have online. You can also download. It's open data. You can play with it and insert it and mash it with other data if you wish. In every country that we work with, we form what we call multi-stakeholder coalitions. So here the process is as important as the outcomes. And I have to say that, especially as we are in this IGF, where we expect to have people from all the sectors, it's very, very important for the success of digital inclusion policies that from start we engage with civil society, private sector, research, and government. And when I say government, not just the Minister of ICTs and or the telecommunications sector or the regulator, but also all over the government. We have to include those who are in charge, for example, of the finance and taxes. We have to include those in charge of education, health, SMEs, and all the sectors all together. So it's multi-stakeholder in the sense of private, public, but also within the government. It's very important because we often see that proposals, very good proposals that are endorsed by the ICT minister or the telecommunications sector government are blocked because the other sectors of government have a different view or perspective on that. So that's why it's very important for us to create this dynamic as much as the quality of the proposals itself. So they all get together and work on developing these proposals. Usually our coalition choose 1 or 2 or 3 teams. We did a lot of work in the Dominican Republic, for example. So we chose to develop the digital agenda, to work on infrastructure sharing, to work on data and research, and the 4th one was tax. So to develop a proposal for a fiscal policy of ICTs that is comprehensive, that looks not just on the consumer tax, but also on how much duty is collected from importing devices or tower equipment that is going to be shared or etc. So it's a very, very wide discussion on taxes here. And all over these countries that you see pointed in this map, we do create these coalitions and make proposals on each of the areas. Women Rights Online is kind of it's a proposal by the Web Foundation that works very closely with A4AI too. So we're going to have Mutoni a bit further down the session to present us more about it. Okay, so one of the latest reports we had last year that I invite you also to visit on our website or on ITU website is this Connecting Humanity website. This is just setting the stage on what is the investment needed to connect everyone, and the definition agreed with the ITU is above 9 years old with a connection that is over 10 meg in terms of quality. So we made that research and we developed econometric models that are that can be used in any country based on the specific data of that country, and estimate the cost needed in mobile infrastructure, in backbone, in network operation, and not only, also in the non-infrastructure aspects, which are linked, for example, to skills, content, special programs to close digital gaps, etc. So this is a very important research that we presented last year. I think we could, when countries are interested, and we've done it in Dominican Republic, develop a more in-depth analysis of country by country. And even within the countries, like we did in the DR, we do region by region or province by province or municipality by municipality. And we can find out where the investment have to go. And then after that, we can develop what part of that investment has to be public or will be public funds, and what part of this investment is part of the investment by the telecommunications and ISPs sector. The affordability report of last year was centered on the terms of broadband plans. Of course, we always develop what we call the ADI, the Affordability Driver Index, where we calculate several indicators based on country surveys and research and primary and secondary data, where we can measure, the IDI does not measure the affordability, but measures the affordability drivers, which means which policies are effectively contributing to better the affordability in the countries. Our last report found out that 11 of 21 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean had an overall, let's say, affordable affordability of broadband. And here I think we have this graph. No, it's not. Okay. And then we can measure, we can see where are the gaps in terms of policy. And this is a very important tool for us to help us target the policy that are most needed upgrade. About affordability, it's very important that we know that in some countries that seem to be affordable at the national level, when you look at the more in detail in the country into income quintiles, you find out that they are not. And this is important that we don't take for granted that, for example, let me say, if any Caribbean country has below 2% at the national level, but then we find that 70% of the rural population is not at that level. So that's why it's important always to look at the details. In terms of the driver index, the affordability drivers index, we have two, at the top 10 of the region, we have two Caribbean countries, which is Dominican Republic and Jamaica there. We do not include yet a lot of Caribbean countries in this research. And I hope that through the partnership, we will be able to cost effectively integrate more countries to provide the data for the affordability driver index. And why not think about a specific report for the Caribbean only. This is from the previous affordability report, but I just wanted to mention that in 2019, we were looking at competition and landlocked countries for which most of the Caribbean countries qualify. And one of the findings was really related to competition and the lack of competition as a main barrier for affordability. But in this year, we were so focused on broadband plans, and the proposal, which is with much more detail in the report itself, looks at how to create broadband plans that spend smart, that create stability for the markets and accountability of the policy. Some of the recommendations, of course, repeat the need for multi-stakeholder participation, the need for having targets that have a clear measurement and a time limit, and that address the most critical gaps. So also accompanied with funding commitments and a plan that is transparent and assessed and reviewed by all the stakeholders every year, at least. The affordability journey, as I said today, the affordability target that is adopted worldwide is the 142. So 1 gigabyte of data that has to be commercially available for at least 30 days under 2% of the income. And that is for us, I mean, we've been working on that for now, I think, 4 years with that target. So we are now pushing and proposing to raise the bar. This year or next year, we're going to already work on the 242. So instead of 1 giga package, we're going to calculate and measure affordability based on the 242. And we want to push in 3 years to have the 542. We have created a journey to go through this. So it's not something that goes it's not tomorrow. It's a journey through that. And we hope to have policymakers think more broadly and set a vision for the long term. So for their 5 years plans to target that everyone in their country, independently from income, from gender, from if they're rural or urban, would have to have available at least a 5 gig mobile data package below 2% of their income. Meaningful connectivity is one of the latest proposals that we've been working on, and it encompasses several 4 pillars, let's say. Why meaningful connectivity first? Right now, the definition that is used to measure users is basically if they have used once in the last 3 months the internet. It's obvious, and the pandemic has made it even more obvious, that no one that uses internet once every 3 months can be considered as an active user or can do anything useful out of that. So that definition needs to be upgraded and updated. And our proposal is to go through this meaningful connectivity definition. And so instead of the target being I connect 80% of my population, is I meaningfully connect 80% of my population or 90%. That definition, of course, has to be relevant, measurable, based on evidence, responsive to gender, and promote a vision of open access. So no limits to access or shutdowns, etc. We've come with that definition with 4 pillars. The speed. So what we call the 4G mobile connection, in fact, is a proxy for a 10 megabyte. It's just that it's easier in the surveys and other tools to use that definition. So sufficient speed, access to a device, and the minimum that was agreed by the research and the consultations that were done last year is a smartphone. A lot of discussion around that. People wanted a computer, a laptop, why a smartphone? But most of the people that were consulted and surveyed in the research phase considered that their most important tool was a smartphone. And especially it had a gender also perspective on it, where the ownership of a smartphone would give more possibilities for women to use than a computer shared at home, which they would have less access to. Also the multimedia, the fact that they can take pictures, create content, easily share, use all the social networks tools, etc., to do not only to socialize but also to sell things or whatever they need to do, access government services, all that. So the smartphone was really used as the base, but it's not a limit. It's not that they just need a smartphone, but at least a smartphone, and hopefully a smartphone, a computer, and a laptop and a tablet. Unlimited data, at least at home or at work or in a public space, a public access, they should have unlimited data access somewhere to be considered to be meaningfully connected, and they should be able and using daily the internet. So that's our definition, and that we are proposing, and some countries are already measuring. And I'm going to ask Anna to take over here on the definitions and how to measure and what's the impact of measuring. And I think there's a very interesting gender, especially for the Caribbean, where we think that we don't have a gender gap in access and connectivity. I think that MC is going to bring a new vision on that. Anna, the floor is yours for the next 10 or 15 minutes.
Thank you, Jacine. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here today, and I will be talking about measuring meaningful connectivity and a bit more about as well affordability of data and devices as well. So next slide, Jacine, please. Thank you. Yeah, so as I was saying, my presentation will be divided in sort of 4 parts. First, building on what Jacine explained about meaningful connectivity, I will go deeper and explain why it's important to measure it and what's our proposal. What questions are we proposing for countries to include in household surveys so they can measure it. I will give you some numbers and figures around meaningful connectivity divide and what did we find in a research that we did in some countries and the findings from that research. And then talking more about the affordability of data, we will look into some figures as well of some countries of the region and how are they doing in terms of mobile data affordability for the different targets that we have set now, 1 gigabyte, 2 gigabyte, and 5 gigabytes. And then lastly, we're very proud to present as well some new data that we have collected for this year on device affordability. This is just, we haven't released that report yet. We just got the data ready to share, and today we're going to share it with you for the Caribbean. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so just like to have that in mind, what Jessine told us, our meaningful connectivity targets are 4. The first one is around the speed. So we use this proxy of 4G mobile connection to understand how fast is the connection that people are having. Then if they are having a smartphone or not, or what type of device do they own. Our third one is about unlimited broadband having an unlimited broadband access point and to use internet daily. If those 4 targets are in place, we say that someone is meaningfully connected. Next, Jessine, please. So what we don't measure, you cannot improve, or you cannot work towards getting to that goal. So together with the target and the specific 4 targets and using meaningful connectivity as a policy tool, we also released a quantitative measures tool as well, and some recommendations for countries to include certain questions in their household surveys. So we have proposed 4 questions, and each of them is related to each of the indicators or targets that we have for meaningful connectivity. So the first indicator is MC1, and it's about if individuals with a mobile internet connection are having what type of technology are they using to connect. And the question that we recommend to include is what type of connection do you have on your mobile device? And this is to understand what the speed is that people are using to connect. And as I said, our recommendation is to ask if people are connected through 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G, just because it's easier for people to understand those concepts and answer accordingly. The second question is related to mobile ownership. And the question that we recommend to include is something around the lines of which of these internet capable devices, if any, do you own? We make an emphasis on owning the device just because we consider that we acknowledge that people share the devices between each other, and that's a way of accessing, of course, but empowerment and meaningful connectivity comes when someone owns the device. This gives someone privacy and also empowers them more if they are owning the device. The third one is MC3, and it's related to having an unlimited broadband connection. And we try to analyze that by location. So the question that is recommended to include in the household survey is around the lines of the places where you access the internet, which of these connections are unlimited in how much data you consume. So we acknowledge as well that people connect in different places, and that, for example, children at school can be connected through an unlimited connection, and that's important to identify and include in the analysis, but also people connect at work or in public spaces or in libraries. So we want to understand where people are connected and if they have an unlimited connection in that location. And the fourth one is MC4, and it's about the frequency of internet use. What we want to understand here is if people are having a daily use of the internet. So the question around that target is how often did you typically use the internet during the last 3 months? And the options are around daily, once a month, once every week. So these 4 questions help us to understand and to measure and to collect data through household surveys and to really analyze it to understand if someone is meaningfully connected or not. So it's, as Jessine said, trying to go beyond the binary of connected or unconnected, or asking, have you used the internet once in the last 3 months? But really understanding what type of connection are they accessing, and if this connection is empowering, if they are able to attend class and healthcare services and do everything that they really want to do with the internet. When we measure this, we understand what people are experiencing when they connect. So we have done the exercise ourselves, and we have collected these meaningful connectivity targets in different countries, in Colombia, Ghana, and Indonesia. And we understood that you can see here that internet use, for example, in Colombia was around 80%, 84%. And then when we looked at it with the meaningful connectivity data and analyzing the 4 different targets, we found out that only 50% of the population are meaningfully connected. Similar in Ghana and Indonesia, the figures change a lot when you see just internet use, connected and unconnected. And it changes when you see meaningful connectivity, it goes down to 11 and 48% in Ghana and Indonesia, respectively. So we can see here that in all countries we have unconnected, but also we have what we call marginal connected people. And the idea is not only to connect the unconnected, but also bring that portion that is in orange to meaningful connectivity, which is in green. So the idea is to move all those dots to what we really want and what we really need, and that is meaningful connectivity. So people are not only connected or unconnected, they are also marginally connected, and that's not ideal. We have also analyzed the digital divide, gender divide with the meaningful connectivity lenses. And we found out that in these, for example, in Colombia, where there's no gender gap in internet use, and they have almost closed the digital gender gap in internet use, when you see the figures in meaningful connectivity, the gender gap goes up to 16, almost 17%. So more men than women are connecting through, are having a meaningful connectivity. And similarly in Ghana and Indonesia, even if they have gender gaps in internet use, when you look at it in meaningful connectivity, the gap widens and it reappears in case it has, in case they don't have gap, it reappears when you look at it in meaningful connectivity. So now talking about affordability, just to understand data affordability, just to understand as well, where are we standing in terms of data prices? As Jacine said, we have been pushing for 1 for 2, so 1 gigabyte of data, of mobile data, for no more than 2% of the average monthly income of a person. But we are trying to raise the bar and include all the other targets in our goals and in our work. So we're not only going for 1 for 2, but also for 2 for 2 and 5 for 2. The 2% is staying, but now we're going to push in 2026. We expect that more countries have 5 gigabyte affordable for a large percent of their population. So looking at those 3 different targets, we can see that the countries, well, these are the countries that we have included in that data price for 2020. This year, we are collecting this data in partnership with ITU, and we have extended our coverage of countries. So we will be able to have more countries, more data of countries in the Caribbean for these 1, 2, and 5 gigabytes. But in 2020, these were the countries that we had. So we can see here that most of the countries are not having affordable data. 1 gigabyte, only Cuba and Dominican Republic have affordable data for 1 gigabyte. And this is only on average of the country. As Jacine said as well, if you look at the quantiles, this changes a lot, and maybe not all the population is accessing through an affordable mobile data plan. So Cuba and Dominican Republic are looking good in terms of the affordability. It's only 1.5% in Cuba that you have to dedicate monthly to buy 1 gigabyte of data. Similar in Dominican Republic. And when you look at 2 gigabytes, it's only Dominican Republic that has affordable 2 gigabytes of data for no more than 2% of the average monthly income, and it has it at 1.8%. And when you look at 5 gigabyte, none of the countries are there yet, and we encourage countries to go towards that goal. So this is our new data on device affordability 2021, and this is just a pre-release of this data. We haven't released it yet officially, but we wanted to share with you here today with the countries of the Caribbean, because this year we have collected more data on these countries on device affordability. This methodology is very similar to the data affordability methodology. And what we do is that we go to the main operators and we select the device, the cheapest device available, a smartphone that is available in the market from the offered by the operators. And here, in this year, we collected data for around 22 countries in the Caribbean. The average of all the countries of the world is around 26%. So the countries in the Caribbean, some countries in the Caribbean are well placed in that. We have countries like Cayman Island, Aruba, Bahamas, and Turks that have a good affordability of a device for less than 5% of the average monthly income. You can access a smartphone in these countries. Very good for Turks and Caicos that has only 0.7% of the average monthly income dedicated to buying a device. So the most affordable ones are there. We have Turks and Caicos, Cayman Island, Aruba, Bahamas, and Curacao. But we also have the other part of the picture, and there are countries that are where the device is quite expensive and people are having to dedicate 20 or more % of their average monthly income to access or to buy a device and a smartphone. Haiti, especially, with almost 50% of the average monthly income dedicated to buying a device and a smartphone. And then we have here sort of a graph that explains us how many days of work do people need to afford a smartphone. You can see here that Trinidad and Tobago, it's only two days. Jamaica, it's around 6 days. And Belize need to save eight days of the average monthly income to afford the smartphone. And Haiti, it's around 15 days of average monthly income that they have to save to be able to access a smartphone. Yeah, I will stop for now. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat or at the end, and I give the word to Jessine.
Yes, thank you very much, Anna. And again, this is an invitation to explore all the data. I mean, this specific one on device 2021 is not yet released, but it will be soon. But the other data is available on the website, and you can download data sets and include them in any algorithm or comparison you want to do. I'm gonna now, time-wise, we have another 40 minutes left, so we want to keep time for discussion and exchange. So I'm gonna invite Mutoni to discuss and present us the work of the Women Rights Online Network. That is also part of the Web Foundation, and that we work very closely to define gender inclusive policies, digital policies. Mutoni, please.
Great. I hope you can hear me. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Mutoni. Okay, fantastic. So I wanted to talk to you today about some of the work that we've done at the Web Foundation and A4AI on gender responsive ICT policy. And we've done this work primarily with a network of women's rights organizations who are located in Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, and Asia. And this is a group of about 20 women's rights organizations who actually have been thinking with us in terms of how can we actually advocate for gender responsive ICT policies. So this presentation would really be taking us through some of the tools we've developed over the years and some of the recommendations we think states should think about in terms of having gender responsive ICT policies. Next slide. I think I'll skip this one because I think we've talked a lot about the gender digital divide, so I am conscious of time. But I do want to say that as we're seeing it, and I think Anna has rightly pointed out, like we're seeing a lot of the gap growing across regions and across the globe. And we are worried that if this is left unchallenged, this will present a big challenge for gender equality in general. Next slide. Anna has also taken us on the journey around meaningful connectivity. What I will add here is that beyond just looking at the quantitative data, it's really useful for us to really think about how people actually use the internet when they get online. So we do know that it's the gender digital divide is not only about inequalities in access to technology, but also how people are able to use the technology and the threats that this technology might pose to their rights, their safety, and their opportunities. So for us, digital equality means considering all these factors as well and building an ecosystem that serves everyone equally without replicating of existing social inequalities and oppressions. As has been pointed out, meaningful connectivity is one way to help us think about that. But also we really need to have analysis that helps us to understand the contextual realities for those who use technology, and in particular women, and understanding what are the key barriers that limit them, even when some of the goals are achieved in terms of access. What are other barriers that women have in terms of accessing and using technology to really improve their lives? The next slide. For the Web Foundation, we did do a report in 2020, which Anna has also indicated. And this report interviewed men and women across 4 countries. That was Colombia, Indonesia, Uganda, and Ghana. And this report really wanted to understand better what are the experiences of women online. So here in front of you, we have some of the key barriers that arose in these interviews. The first one was time. A lot of women said that they didn't have time, even when they had access, they didn't have time to go online because of the care burden or unpaid care work. And especially during COVID time, we've seen that care burden has increased for women. And therefore, the time that they have to actually go online and actually be able to use the technology to find information, access opportunities is quite limited. And therefore, for us, we need to think about when we are talking about barriers, we really also need to start dismantling these other inequalities that exist for women. The other thing that was noted was affordability. A lot of women cannot afford the devices, or even when they do afford the devices, they cannot afford the data bundles. And so this is related with women's general wage gap across the world. And therefore, because women are mostly dependent on their spouses or are earning less than their male counterparts, we tend to find that also they don't have the same kind of capacity to meaningfully engage. When we heard from people who are non-users of the internet, one of the reasons they said they didn't use the internet was digital skills. A lot of them said that they didn't have skills to be able to navigate some of the smartphones, understand how to navigate the phone. So I think that's something that keeps coming up. Another thing that came up as well was safety and security, and this is related to what women experience when they do get online. So a lot of online gender-based violence means that a lot of women are scared of going online, or when they're online, they're scared of speaking out and using the web in ways that would enable them exercise their rights or take up opportunities that are presented, because they are worried that they might be victims of violence online. And this, we are seeing that women are then opting out either from online spaces or choosing to self-censor themselves in terms of democratic debates. Another issue that came up with women more than men was data protection and privacy. As a lot of women remarked that they were worried about how their data is protected once they get online and how they can guard their privacy. And this is also linked to, obviously, violence and ways in which people can have access to information or their pictures, etc. So that's something that came out as a key barrier to women's participation online. Another thing that came up was relevant content. A lot of women say that even when they do get online, the content that they get isn't really relevant for them. And relevant content here also means it's not put in an accessible language for them. It isn't, they cannot access the information that they need to improve their lives, whether it's healthcare, information that they might need. So during COVID time, we found that a lot of women couldn't find easily the information that they needed in terms of accessing healthcare. I think the slide has gone off, Yasin. seen? Oh, yeah. And then the last one was social norms. And I think this is where research is really useful for us in understanding what are the other social norms that hinder and impact women's access to meaningful connectivity. And this will vary from country to country, even within the country, region, community. And these social norms are really, they're really important for us to understand in terms of how we start to shape policy to shift them. The next slide. So why is digital gender gap important? I think we can all agree that no one should be left behind. So I wouldn't belabor that point. But I think also closing the gender gap is a driver for a competitive digital economy. Obviously, it's critical to harnessing worldwide knowledge, talent, and innovation capacity for women and other groups. Women need to also access online information and services that are key to their daily life. So again, connected to COVID, we saw that because of the lockdowns that we have experienced globally, lack of being able to go outside to get information, the web became a lifeline for many in terms of getting news, getting information about their relatives or health, etc. And therefore, we see that this is really key in their day-to-day life. And then also women's knowledge and experience should be equally recognized and included in the infrastructure systems and in online spaces. So a lot of times we find that women aren't content creators. They aren't part of creating the content, are not part of creating the ecosystem that will inform how they access technology, and also that technology is not built with their particular experiences in mind. And so therefore we find that it in ways limits the ways in which they can use this technology. The next slide. Another additional point is just to say that under the Sustainable Development Goals, governments and states have committed to ensure that we can reach these goals. So goal 1, 4, 5, 9, and 17. But particularly, I think important for us is SDG 5B, which is how to use information and communication technology to empower women. The importance of being able to provide universal and affordable internet access by 2020, which we're a bit late. And then by 2030, ensure that all men and women have equal rights to economic resources, as well as to basic services and appropriate new technology. And by 2030, sustainable increase in the number of youth, adults, and looking at the gender dynamics of youth as well, who have relevant skills, including technical, vocational skills for employment, decent job, and entrepreneurship. And then lastly, that we need to create partnership to achieve all these objectives. Next slide. So why do ICT policies need to be gender responsive? I think one of the first things is really allowing for gender perspectives in policies means to fully understand the different impacts of public policy on people in society. So really understanding what are the gendered impacts of the policies were created and how do they impact differently situated people in that particular society or community. We're also cognizant that women are not a homogeneous group, and so that when we talk about women, we cannot just have one size fits all policies. We must really understand what are their lived experiences. For example, what are the different social economic groups' needs? What are the different ethnic communities in terms of age, sexual orientation, disability, etc. So really having research that looks into how differently placed women are impacted by policy. Women have differential access to the internet due to factors such as income, we know education, levels of education and social norms which need to be taken into account when developing inclusive policy. Next slide. So at the Web Foundation, together with the Women's Rights Online Network, we've done two things. So one, we developed a toolkit which measures the gender digital gap in countries, which we call the digital gender gap audits. And this toolkit helps us to analyze and better collect data that informs us in terms of where the country is at in terms of women's rights online. And the toolkit is divided into 4 thematic areas. So one is internet access and women's empowerment. Second is affordability. The third is digital skills and education. The fourth is relevant content and services for women. And the fifth is online safety. And these thematic areas enable us to be able to capture the different experiences of women and understand what exists in terms of data, policy frameworks to ensure that women can enjoy all these different rights. Over the years, what we have done with the gender gaps is we've had countries around, I think over 20 countries, who have undertaken the gender research scorecard. And this has really given us insight into some of those qualitative but also quantitative information gaps. One of the things we've realized that a lot of times we don't have data that is available or accessible in terms of all the different thematic areas of focus. And this is an area that I think for the Caribbean, we are currently undertaking a gender scorecard for Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, where we hope to release in 2022. And this gender scorecard will really enable us to understand what are those gender gaps that exist in these particular regions, and therefore what kinds of policy recommendations will be needed in terms of improving the gap. The second the second toolkit that we developed is what we call the REACT framework, and I will explain. So the REACT framework is really a policy that enables us to think of how we can develop policy that actually tackles the problem of the gender digital divide. So REACT stands for rights, education, access, content, and target. Next slide. So when we think of developing policy, we must think of what are some of the key questions we must ask ourselves as we're developing the policy. So the first one we asked is rights. What are women's rights online? So make the internet safe and empowering for women and girls by protecting online rights, including safety and privacy. So for example, are there enough protections that protect women from online violence? Is there strong data protection laws that exist or that need to be placed? Can women exercise their right to freedom of speech and opinion? And so ensuring that the policy does look at women's rights from an ICT perspective and ensure that those rights are guaranteed in any policy. The second is education. So ensuring everyone, especially women and girls, have the opportunity to improve their digital skills and information literacy so they can access and evaluate information and use the internet in their fullest potential. So this means that governments have to think of how can we put together education curricula that really provides the kind of education that will enable women and girls, especially young women, to really use the internet for their full potential. The other one is access. And I think I won't belabor on this because Yasin and Anna have already talked about it. But the point here is really how do you develop more public access solutions? How do you create options for subsidized basic data allowances focused on women, meaning that women can be able to afford the web? Content, prioritize women's participation in technology development, local content and creation, ICT. So how does the policy address how we can support women to be equal creators, producers of online content? Are there policies that promote women being creative content creators? Are there policies that or projects that enable women to be able to take up these professions? And the last and the most important is targets. So how do we make sure that we adopt concrete ICT gender equity targets backed by adequate budgets? So collecting ICT data disaggregated by gender, income, location, and the different intersectionalities that might exist in a particular country, and develop new indicators to measure the impact on technology on women. Next slide. So using the REACT framework, a number of countries have started to put together gender responsive ICT policies. So you can see from the slide there. So in Senegal, the Senegalese digital plan included a high-level commitment to mainstream gender in the broadband policy decision. They've also set clear targets of 33% rate of use for e-commerce and public services by rural female population by 2025. As an example. In Costa Rica, on the other hand, we have a national broadband plan in Costa Rica, which includes women's access as a core component and sets goals around supporting women's online and entrepreneurship within the plan targets. And in Thailand, whereas they don't have a particular gender target in the national broadband plan, They do have a women development strategy, which includes promotion of women's access, training, and use of internet. But however, despite the examples that we've seen, globally, we see that there's a lack of gender desegregated data. And that means that policies are not well informed, but also we also see opportunities in terms of how this data can be generated. So for example, using innovative online advertising data can provide a way to fill up the gaps that currently exist in particular countries. Next slide. So I think using the REACT framework, one of the things that we advocate for and our partners have been advocating for is to ensure that, one, we involve gender data experts in policy planning from the get-go. Oftentimes, there's a disconnect between those who are developing ICT policy sometimes, or the gender colleagues who are working on gender mainstreaming. So making sure that that is at the get-go. We need to make sure that we're collecting and using gender data to inform gender responsive projects design and implementation. We need to ensure that we have time-bound targets to achieve gender equality in accessing in all areas of policy. Important to invest resources in projects, programs, policies, and laws that address the barriers to women's internet access and use. And I've highlighted there the different barriers we've already identified before. The next slide. So that could include investing in digital skills, education, supporting women's participation in technology, safeguarding the online privacy for women and girls, and also targeting social norms that limit women's access and use of the technology, but also make sure that we integrate ICT policies in existing gender and development strategies so that this does not only exist in one arm of government or one department of government, but these are actually mainstreamed throughout other strategies within government. So for example, education, health, agriculture, etc. But I think most importantly, and I think Yasin started with this point, is like break the silos through gender responsive policy making. So making sure that everyone is involved, whether it's private sector, government, civil society, in ensuring that we have really gender responsive policies that speak to women's lived experience in a particular context. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mutoni. Great presentation. Thank you very much. And I think it's a lot of bells might have ringed around the audience. I hope so. Our fight to get women groups understand the importance of integrating the fight for digital gender policies into their agendas and advocacy plans. We've been fighting for this for years, and we have a lot of material here for that. Next, I'm going to introduce Natalia, my colleague Natalia Foric, who's based in Brazil and who has been recently leading a regional study on universal service funds. And I know that they have focused their research in several Caribbean countries, and we have the privilege and the honor to get a preview of that research. There is no presentation, just Natalia herself. Welcome, Natalia.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you to everyone that is with us today. Special thanks to Nigel for the invitation. I was just thinking that I have seen Nigel in Jamaica, in Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, and now I'm seeing him virtually, but hopefully we'll be able to have meetings like this in person again soon. We'll briefly talk about this joint study we are conducting with ISOC. It hasn't been launched yet. It will be launched soon, so I won't be able to cover all the topics we are addressing, but it's just to give you an idea of what's going to be about and some of the highlights regarding the Caribbean region. I think first of all, the study is about universal service and access funds in Latin America and Caribbean. Why is this important? I mean, I know that we have been talking about this for so long, right? For over a decade, but the need is still there. We still need resources. We still need to connect a bunch of people. And this is one of the main ways through which governments can support not only the deployment of infrastructure, but also policies at the demand side. I would like to ask you all to mute your microphones, please. So in the Caribbean, we have analyzed a few countries in the region: Dominica, Dominican Republic, Grenada, Guyana, Jamaica, Haiti, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Trinidad and Tobago. We conducted 56 interviews with private sector leaders, with civil society leaders, and with government officials. And we have in the report part on the legal policy and regulatory frameworks, as well as the financial information that is in each of the funds. We have information on what types of projects are funded. We have information on the recent developments, and we have a bunch of recent developments across the region. And in the end, we have some actionable recommendations. Well, first, among the countries we analyzed in the Caribbean, most countries have active funds, with the exception of Haiti, which has no fund, and Guyana has a fund but is not currently active. And with active, we considered funds that have some activities over the past 3 years. Some recent developments in the region are, for example, that Trinidad and Tobago has finally disbursing its funds, and after an amendment in 2019. Another example is another thing that we have covered is disbursement rates. Jamaica has been disbursing more than it has been collecting over the past years. Another interesting point is that among the countries that are part of the Eastern Caribbean and Telecommunications Authority, disbursement rates vary from 40% to 95%. 95% is in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We also covered some specific issues related to transparency, efficacy, and efficiency. For example, Jamaica makes results of the independent auditors public, which is a good thing. Although we have also seen that in a lot of cases, the assessment that is done whenever an accounting assessment is done in these various countries, the evaluation of the efficiency and efficacy of the project is much related to from an accounting point of view rather than the impact itself in the efficacy of the projects. So we understand we need a broader approach to these evaluations. So another point is that it's important that the funds are used not only for administrative costs, as we have seen in a few countries as Dominican Republic and Jamaica, but mainly towards the projects, the connectivity projects themselves, rather than administrative costs of the organizations that are leading these projects, right? We also have seen that it's really important to have updated legal policy and regulatory frameworks that target not only deployment, but connectivity from a demand side, right? Examples of this that have already been implemented in Dominican Republic, St. Lucia, and Trinidad and Tobago illustrate how this can be done. So these are really brief, high-level points that I would like to bring your attention to. I invite you all to read the report we're going to launch soon. And we are also thankful for the participation of several organizations that are here with us today that I'm sure contributed with the interviews. We also like to thank Isaac for the partnership on this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalia. That was a great quick review of the report. I think I'm sure there will be a lot of interest in the Caribbean to make a specific webinar or workshop just around that, around the results in the Caribbean of the USF. I think the many stakeholders in civil society have been questioning the efficiency of the use of USFs and how much they were maybe not used for the right purpose or used more with the political, let's say, instrumentalizations of USF and these kind of questions. And I think that we need data and research to know what is the reality and how civil society together with the private sector and governments can help, that their funds are used to what they are supposed to do, increase the connectivity possibility at the margin of where the market is not reaching. So that's a very important thing. Nigel, I need to know, we have officially 10 minutes. I think with the introduction, you can give us, the recap you did, 5 minutes more.
I do. All right. Are you ready for feedback and questions now?
No, I will still have one section, and I want to know how short or long do I do it.
Else is it?
Okay. So I can take 5 minutes, and then we can take 15 minutes.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right.
And it will be great if we can have a picture with all the cameras on at some point, maybe after I present that.
Exactly. I was about also to say that. My colleague was reminding me that we need to take a screenshot before we break.
Great. So the last point is just to introduce what we call the rural broadband framework. I think you can see that now. Okay, which we already also presented last year, but we have deepened down and developed a tool, a policy, playbook, and a workshop. We are going to provide some kind of hands-on training to anyone interested, policymakers in particular, but anyone interested in how to develop this rural broadband policy framework. The reason for having specific policy for connecting the rural is obvious. The divide, this is worldwide. There is a large urban-rural divide in terms of connectivity, more in terms of course, meaningful connectivity, in terms of affordability. And it's and the dynamic between social and economic development and connectivity is obvious. The more poor you are, or the less developed areas have less internet access or less quality of internet access, and that widens the social economic divides also. So the relation between economic, social, and digital divides with this urban-rural lens is also very important to consider. That framework has 8 areas of intervention where we propose digital policies to be differentiated. So you don't treat an operation in a rural area the same way you treat an operation in a urban area. And that relates, for example, to spectrum, that relates, for example, to taxing, that relates, for example, to authorizations and providing all the rights of ways and other administrative processes that they have to go through to deploy infrastructure in rural. Spectrum can be tendered with different prices for urban rural. Infrastructure that is shared in rural areas that will drive the price of bringing connectivity can also be treated differently in terms of, for example, the fiscal, the taxations, all that. So we have these 8 areas where we look at what can be done differently, to ensure that the rural areas catch up in terms of access and connectivity and affordability and meaningful connectivity. I'm not going to go to all that, just to know that we want that policy to be gender responsive, to use evidence, to be comprehensive, so to address both offer and demand of connectivity, to look at also innovative models, like you can provide a new kind of licensing frameworks for community networks, all this kind of thing, and to be sure that we bring the same quality. We do not want second-class citizens living in rural areas. We want the same experience, the same quality, and the same affordability in rural areas as some enjoy already in urban areas. And that can be done only with broad participation. Again, I'm very happy that this is an IGF where we can reinforce the idea that multi-stakeholder participation has to be in every step of policy making, that policy making and decisions has to be transparent, and there needs to be accountability. It's not just that we do a policy and it's gone, but really the policy implementers have to be accountable, especially for these rural areas. So this is all the 8 areas, this very specific elements for each area. I will keep them in the presentation that will be shared, but I will not go through them now, so we don't take time for the discussion. And I'm going to jump to the few questions that are just starters, or questions to spark a discussion. We really would like to have this as an open discussion from now in the next 15 minutes. So of all these elements, we talked about affordability policies, about meaningful connectivity, about device affordability, about gender perspective, about rural broadband. Which of those do make sense to you? Which you think could be adopted and implemented or advocated in the countries where you work? We want to know how we can broaden. I know that in the Caribbean, we have Caribbean civil society is often a few organizations and people that are already attending a lot of different issues, from violence, gender, climate change, whatever. And then adding this digital for many of them does not seem very important, but how can we work to convince the broader civil society in the Caribbean that these are issues that will impact what they do, and that they won't reach their, education, health, climate-related targets if they don't integrate, the digital, let's say, empowerment as part of their own policies, agriculture, small farmers, women, youth at risk, whatever. For all of that, you can use digital. How do we convince them? How do we bring them into this arena? I think, and now that we're talking, there's another session on digital IDs, and there is the issues of privacy and all that. This will impact everyone, and it's not just a matter of us on the ICT or /digital sector. We need to have all these others come and have a say also, and be part of the conversation. How do we do it? How do we build this effective intersectional collaboration framework? That's a question I have for you, the participants in this panel, and I hope we can discuss a bit that now. But first, what? Okay.
Yeah, just before we get to that, let me also say that there were a couple of comments that came in on the chat complimenting the presentations and so on. Soledad initially suggested that we also need to measure digital divide in education. And I have a question too from Shannon Osepa, specifically related to device affordability. He was asking, did you also look at the brand of the device, or that it just has to be a smart device? Was there any distinction in the brand?
Yeah, we looked at Thank you for the question, Nigel. Yes, we looked at the brands, and we have a whole data set with all the brand. And yeah, so we do have that. We will release that when we release the whole data set, and you can look at what brand is it, what as well. We collected a couple of other data points around the specific type of the device, and so yeah.
Okay. I have a question too about the meaningful connectivity targets, and they're being refined, and as we go forward, well, first established and then being refined as we go forward. Of course, the way they're being refined is like demanding more value for money from the operators in terms of more data, but keeping the price cap at 2% of income. Are you getting inputs from the operators in evolving these targets? And are you getting any pushback from them? Because they no doubt are going to say, well, you want more data, you want faster speed and so on. But if prices are not to move, it might be cutting into their margins and so on. So I'm asking whether there is any feedback from the operators on some of these things.
I think it's part of the conversation because we're not looking, I mean, when we talk about affordability policies, we are pushing for measures to bring the cost of delivering the service down. So when we're talking about, spectrum management, about tax, about efficient use of universal service fund to push demand, for example, side projects, or the price of spectrum right, or differentiate spectrum in rural areas. What we want is the industry cost to go down, right? So they can deliver services at a lower price. It's not just about the price, it's about the whole ecosystem. So when we push for infrastructure sharing, it means that one backbone will deliver competition at the service level in the locality, and they don't have to compete investing 3 backbones. So the price, of delivering the service is down. So the cost of delivering the service is down, so the price can go down. So that's the vision, and that we have to do together. And of course, a company is a company. They want to maximize their benefits without doing more efforts. That's natural. That's natural. That's what they are businesses, right? But they have to understand that there is a way of still being benefit, of still making benefit, of still making profits, of still, and in fact being more sustainable in the long term, because the more people have more affordable access, more economic development will impact in more people buying their services anyway. So it's a win-win. We don't, if someone has a pushback, it's because they're not seeing long-term enough that what this is doing is expanding their also market and then their profit. So that's where we. I think you're muted.
Yes, I'm muted. I will pose your question to the audience. You asked about general feedback and in terms of whether the targets make sense, whether, and some of the other proposals. In fact, it might be good if you could back up your question slide. And that might stimulate some feedback. And so audience, you're encouraged to respond. You can either put something in the chat or raise your hand and we'll try to accommodate you. While we wait, Yasina, with respect to the rural policy framework, we are working to give you an opportunity as early as next month, I guess, to give a more detailed workshop on that for the policymakers of the region within the framework of the CTU's statutory meetings, what we call our ICT week. It's not quite determined as yet, but hopefully before this week is out, we'll be able to get back to you with a confirmation. I think it's important that we are. Michelle just put something on the chat. The question was posted on the YouTube live streaming. Question on device affordability. Were the dollar amount shown indicative of the price of the device in this specific territory or market? There was a slide, I guess. So I don't know if Anna could clarify.
Yeah, there was a slide where we had like the top 5 and the least 5 of most affordable devices, and we had in black the affordability percent. So how affordable is that in terms of the average monthly income? And then in brackets, we had the price in US dollars. We always had those two, the price in like the cost, so the affordability, and in US dollars of each of the of each country.
Right, okay.
Yeah,
So
How was that
it's
specific device selected? The ones that the price is, Anna? Just to
Yeah, I mentioned that as well about the methodology, and it's very similar to the data mobile methodology. And what we do is that we select the cheapest smartphone in the market offered by one of the largest operators. I think they should have more than 30% of the market share in the market to be selected. And then we find the cheapest available smartphone. And yeah, that's how we do it.
This methodological, Nigel, just to the methodological and how we choose the device here, or how we choose the data packet that is measured for affordability is very important, because we often get that there are other people who collect some data and then they make an average, or they choose, for example, data packages that are in promotion, and they say, oh, but here your data is not right because I can get a 1 gig, for less than that. But the reality is that it's very strict in defining how we choose that package. It has to be available, for example, for 30 days, and it has to be offered by one of the dominant market operators. So if in Brazil, that is, 100 million and 90 million people and thousands of different towns, there is one company that offers one plan for 3 days in one small city, that's not the reference. It has to be offered, available for 30 days. That 1 gig has to be offered. So even if you're not selling anymore 1 gig, you're selling only 5 gig or 10 gig, we still will take that 5 gig or that 10 gig and say that's the only way you can get 1 gig, use 1 gig over 30 days, and we use that package as a reference. And it's very different from that other company that just makes an average of everything that is available, and the result is a bit different. And some countries will say, yeah, but that other result, we are cheaper there. Why are we so expensive? Why are we so expensive here? Because we are very strict in the methodology, and that is a methodology that we agreed with ITU. It's important to know.
Right. Okay. Someone asked about the presentation slides, and I mentioned at the outset that we would be posting them to the event webpage on the CTU website. So a little patience, and we'll get them. The issue of multi-stakeholder collaboration, in Mark Hewitt's opinion, to developing a more ubiquitous set of solutions. His question is, how does your data incorporate the emergence of global networks such as Starlink and GlobalNet, etc., when they begin operations? And the second part is, how are you addressing the obstacles of, whoops, what happened there? How are you addressing the obstacles of regulatory limitations that block access to these services? Go ahead, Yassine.
No, Anna, are we integrating the possibility of the connectivity by satellite in the research?
Not yet. Not yet.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess we'll see what the impact of that eventually is. And so that I'd shared a couple of links related to.
And on Mark's last question, how we are. Sorry. Hello.
Yes, I'm hearing.
Okay. I said that how we are addressing. This is really a matter of national legislation. So our recommendation is that those multi-stakeholder coalition, set that need to set the right framework to be able to use cheaper methods. And it's not only about, satellite. Right now, we have a big discussion ongoing in many countries in Latin America about the 6G bands. Should it be used for 5G IoT, or should it be used to provide wide, Wi-Fi networks? And there is a battle between, there is a discussion between, operators that want that spectrum and others. And I think somewhere also satellite operators have a say there. So all these is, we look at the greater public good possible, whatever solution that is. And we push for stakeholders to sit and talk. Why is it important, these stakeholders sitting together? Often, if you come with the best solution just by yourself, meaning government or ICT ministers, once you publish it, you say this is the regulation or this is the policy, you will get a lot of uproar, a lot of back push. But if you have come out with the same solution in a participatory process, the different stakeholders, including the operators, would have chewed already, would have, assimilated why this decision, why that was the best option for everyone. And so the process makes a difference in the way that a policy or regulation is accepted. And it gives more chance to successfully implement any policy and regulation if you have had the discussion. So the same policy, the same measure, the same decision, if it's made collectively, will be more effective than it's made individually by a brilliant minister.
All right, thanks. I think we'll have to leave it there for the moment. Yassine, I want to thank you and the team, Natalia, Anna, and Tony, for the presentations. I think they were very well received. The comments I've seen have been quite favorable, and people are looking forward to receiving, to seeing a copy of the slides. So I think you'll get a lot of feedback with respect to that. So if you stop sharing now, actually we'll try to take the picture of the, we can take the profile picture. We'll ask all attendees, please turn your cameras on so that we can get a picture of a screenshot of the full audience. You'll appear, I guess, both on CTU and A4AI or Web Foundation.
Good morning, everyone. Is that all? Or shall I wait just a little bit for everyone to their cameras?
Yes, please. Please just turn on your cameras so that we can get a decent looking screenshot.
All right, Leslie Noble, you made it in time.
Yes, I just let her in. Navin looks like he's driving.
All right. Shall I wait for anyone or shall I proceed? It seems to be as though,
Yeah.
This is all we have.
Yeah,
all right.
Or maybe that's all we'll get. So go ahead.
No problem. I'll work with what we have.
Yes. Oh, here's Kevin, just came.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the other one, Kevin.
Great. So,
back pass, eh?
smile one more time. Yes. Right. I think I have exactly what I need. So thank you very much, everyone.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much to the A4.
Nigel, you're muted.
You're right. I
Nigel, just a minute, please. I just got a message. Bevel is coming over, so if we can do it one more time, if you can wait for him.
Coming over.
He's viewing on YouTube. Yes, he's coming over to Zoom. Yes, he wants to be in the photo as well. So if we can wait for him.
All right. Well, I guess we'll see him shortly. You'll see him in a minute.
All right.
Yeah. Just to set it up, we'll be going next into our discussion on foundational digital IDs, which I think would be an item of general interest and wide interest as well. So we'll be getting some presentations from different countries of the Caribbean and hopefully comparing notes and generating some animated discussion on approaches, what sort of benefits, safeguards need to be in place. So we'll be doing that. I think we'll shorten, we still will take a short break. I'm not seeing Bevel. We still will take a short break before we actually do that.
Here he is.
Yeah, there he is.
All right.
And right, in Tariq too.
All right, just wait for him to put on his camera.
Yeah, we'll give people a comfort break before we.
There he is. Great.
There he is, finally.
Oh.
Nice having you. Okay.
All right.
All right, so we'll do this again.
Yes.
That was worth the wait.
Put on your best smile, please. All right, I see there's a Gabrielle Johnson. Let me see if she wants Gabrielle, if she's joining. I can't hurry.
People might now be joining for
Yes.
the other session.
All right, Gabrielle Johnson, if you wish, you can put on your camera. We're taking
I'm
a
taking a
good shot.
screenshot.
Yes, screenshot. All right. So here we go. Put on that
Yes.
smile again.
Okay.
All right, I think I have everyone.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, folks. Thanks to you for AI team again. And you are invited to stick with us during the day as your schedule might allow. But right now we will take a 10-minute break, which would mean that we come back at the start of the next session at about 10:50, about 10 minutes before 11 o'clock our time here in Eastern Caribbean. So break time. We'll be right back.
Well, I think she getting confused because the responses that I'm working on is a response to trade when they ask about the status of the implementation of the TT trade policy. And what NICT responded.
Okay, I'll say welcome back, folks, to our next session of the. Yes, I'll say welcome back, folks, to our next session of the 17th Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. And in this session, we'll be addressing the sometimes controversial issue of foundational digital identification, foundational digital IDs. Our intention would be to share national experiences and lessons learned, and see if we can identify opportunities for collaboration and harmonizing our approaches going forward here in the Caribbean. Taking us through this session, the moderator is my colleague from the CTU Secretariat, Mr. Junior McIntyre. He's one of our ICT consultants. And I'll hand it over now to Junior to introduce the topic and his panel of discussion personnel. So Junior, all yours.
Thank you very much, Nigel, and good afternoon. Well, it's still morning, sorry.
Still morning, yes.
But I suppose depending on where you're coming from, it may be afternoon. So good day, everyone. As Nigel indicated, this panel will be focusing on foundational digital IDs, promise, perils, and paths. And the panel today would be, to me, panel, the team and the panel today with me will be Marlon Nassis. He's the Director of Public Service Modernization from the Government of St. Lucia. We have Dr. Clarence Henry, Senior Technical Officer, Regional Integration Unit from the OECS. Just to set the context before we get into the specific presentations, Nigel said a bit about it before, and we just want to just reiterate the fact that national digital identity systems are essentially the foundational ID systems which we use to register citizens. Most of us may not, some of us may not be aware of the context. Others may be to register citizens, which would also serve as an authoritative source of by which government can facilitate the use, the provisioning of a host of public services. And we know some of them might be paying taxes, registering marriages, debts, property, purchasing property, licensing a vehicle, health treatment, etc. But also to note that the private sector can also leverage government-provided digital identities to offer services to citizens as well. So digital identities are intended essentially to ease the conduct of many services, financial transactions, whether they are face-to-face or across over the internet, across multiple sectors. What is interesting though, I think the previous session this morning spoke specifically to it. We can't really stress the importance of making these services inclusive and accessible by providing affordable, meaningful broadband connectivity. So essentially, even though we provide the infrastructure and the services, if it isn't affordable, and as we heard this morning a lot about, essentially, it would restrict the leverage and the reach of the services we intend to offer to our citizens. And I think that we touched a bit on that yesterday. So essentially, the vision of the CTU for digital IDs is that it's issued at the country level, and we know it's a national product or service, but essentially recognized by countries across the region, and therefore become a really powerful driver of economic and regional integration, including the promotion of safe and orderly migration. So we see the use of digital IDs not only essential at the national level, but also at the regional level as well. We also recognize that there's a heightened interest and a trust among our members to move towards the implementation of national digital identity systems. And we are aware of this, and so we recognize there are some institutional arrangements that exist, and I'll talk about it at the end, but there is need to support the move at a regional level and to move things forward. So we also recognize that there is significant institutional strengthening and capacity building to ensure that our regional institutions are robust enough, the governance structures are in place, and these integrated systems are in place to support the provisioning of planned national digital identity So, those are some of the things we would probably want to touch on today. I know our team is here, and we have first off Marlon Narcis. So this is just to set the context, and I'll ask Narcis to get into his presentation to tell us what is happening in St. Lucia. So Marlon, over to you.
Thank you very much, Junior. How are you doing? Good morning, everybody.
I'm great. Good.
I just want to thank the CTU for inviting me over to make this presentation on the St. Lucia context as we go through the implementation of our DigiGov project, which focuses heavily on the implementation of our identity management system, which we call the National Authentication Framework. So I'll quickly run into my agenda. So we're looking at, just give you a brief idea of who we are at the Division of Public Sector Modernization in St. Lucia. We'll speak a little bit on digital transformation and how that is a catalyst for what we want to do now. We'll focus on the authentication framework. I'll lay out some of the challenges that we have encountered and anticipated, and also some of the lessons that we think that would be important for us to understand going forward. And then looking at the way forward, just for the immediate 12 to 18 months as we go with the project. So our strategic objective within the department focuses on policy, ensuring that there's the right policy framework and the regulatory framework to support digital transformation and the implementation of the national ID system. The department also provides a lot of leadership to the government as we move towards ICT and the modernization of the public service, but also to ensure that there is a digital ecosystem that is thriving on cutting-edge technology and solutions. The department also champions a lot of innovative solutions, just like the DigiGov platform, and that platform essentially allows us to simplify a lot of the processes that exist now within government, and also to reduce on the complexities of fragmentation and duplication within the various silos within the government infrastructure, and how it currently does and provides the services at this point in time. We constantly do a lot of evaluation and monitoring of the system just to ensure that our total cost of ownership continues to go down, but also to ensure that, even within the project framework as well, that we ensure that, we look at all of the processes and accept the feedback from the various stakeholders as we move along. One of the key responsibilities that we have within the department as well is to ensure that there is a proper alignment of the ICT personnel and skills to support the digital transformation drive that the government is on at this point in time. But one of the key things here as well is for the retention of skilled persons, skilled personnel. And one of the things that we've embarked on as well is to set up this career path so that persons, that once we recruit individuals in that ICT space, we are able to keep them and not lose them to the private sector. You'll find that a lot of times within government, you're not able to keep the skilled personnel because there's not a lucrative benefit there for them, and also there is no career path for an individual to really consider public service as a career. So in the context of the public sector, we see digital transformation as how government harnesses and uses technology to improve its programs and services to create better outcomes for citizens and residents. This is very, very key, and one of the foundational principles that we've embarked on with the implementation of the DigiGov project. It is a heavily technology-driven project. However, for us to be successful, we recognize the need to look holistically at the organizational structure, the governance frameworks that would be necessary to ensure that this thing continues and goes on the right path. The constant review of the processes, even those that we've already looked at making those technology interventions, to ensure that we continuously improve and to factor in the feedback that we get from our constituents. And also looking at that culture We have a change management framework for user adoption, and the intention there is for us to focus heavily on the culture within the agency to gradually try to move it and to align that culture to the principles of the project and just the principles of the digital transformation agenda. I can remember a couple of weeks ago, I was at a training program and there was a slide which said, the strategy, culture is strategy for breakfast. And this is something that's very serious and that has to be considered, once you embark on this digital transformation process. So digital citizenship is, again, one of the fundamental and underlying principles that we've been focusing on with this digital transformation journey. And this forms a catalyst for what we see within the identity management space. We want to have digital citizens who understand their responsibility as they use technology. But we also want to focus on the equity of access, e-participation, which again would drive persons to the platform to engage with government. We also follow the policy or of one data only once, so that it is easier and a more secure environment for persons to connect to government. And also, again, the forming the foundation for digital identification. So what was our journey and how did we start? So once the government gave the go-ahead for us to begin this digital transformation journey, we embarked on an initiation phase, focusing on the business processes of those services that were identified as have high and heavy usage by the public. We also assessed the legal and regulatory environment to ensure that there are no impediments to the implementation of the technology to support government services. We also looked at the infrastructure of the ICT as well as the physical infrastructure within those environments, within those agencies, to ensure that whatever technology solutions and whatever residual impacts of the implementation of the technology, the infrastructure that exists there would be able to facilitate the implementation. And also, as I mentioned earlier, we focus heavily as well on the change management framework for user adoption. So our flagship project is called DigiGov, and our slogan is serving people and businesses with that island love. And we, again, tried our best to reach out to the public and just to show a different face of government, where somebody could interact with technology, but also, just ensuring that we reach out to persons, communicate with the public, with our constituents on a continuous basis. So our goal here is to connect people, empowering individuals to interact with government on their own terms. So we want to ensure that it is a convenient process, a convenient access to those services. Connecting businesses to ensure that we could add value to what DigiGov brings to the table, and I will speak about the value-added services and how we plan to incorporate the private sector to build that and develop this digital ecosystem in St. Lucia. And also in connecting ministries and agencies, because this is the only way the service can be provided, where you understand the processes and ensure that the mechanisms from one agency to the next provides the support needed for a user to fulfill the requirements of a service requirement. And also connecting governments one to the other, countries one to the other. As we spoke about digital ID, we speak of digital Caribbean integration, regional integration, but also looking at trade as well. And this is another important aspect of the process that we really want to undertake. And in the next couple of months, in the 12 to 18 months, we will be looking into some sort of a trade facilitation platform to facilitate even better trade within the island and also regionally as well and internationally. So the platform currently provides for online applications, online payments. We have a lot more shorter processing times, and there are real-time notifications from the platform at every step in the process. And also, there is a concept where we call it the request for action, where officers can directly communicate with a constituent once they've applied for a process, and whether there is any verification needed for any aspect of part of the process that the person may be going through. I just wanted to make sure that we highlighted the organizational alignment, which is so key, with especially the implementation of a digital system like DigiGov. So we wanted to make sure that we had a shared vision, which is aligned DigiGov with the agency's vision, and also to ensure that there are matrices that would allow us to be able to really measure a lot of the key aspects to the implementation, especially the area with regards to benefits management, to ensure that across the board within the agency and externally, we were able to show what the benefits are that are arising from the implementation of that technology platform. We also looked at the user and employee experience to ensure that the employees provide a lot of the feedback for the implementation. So during the assessment phase, for example, it was the employees within the departments, the beneficiary departments, that were the real informers of the information that was submitted with regards to processes, governance, etc. And this bottom-up approach really showed a lot of benefit. Once the project was implemented or the services were rolled out, persons had this sense of ownership and alignment to what was happening. Again, as I spoke of earlier, we had to look at the alignment to the technology, what currently exists within the agency, and how best it would have been for us to be able to implement the technology interventions. And the elephant in the room, organizational change, culture, and a lot of training and retraining and retooling and reskilling. I think one of the main questions that we had when we met with the internal and external stakeholders, persons were concerned about their tenure of service, whether they would lose their jobs. And because of how we structured the project and the processes, we were able to, internally within the government, retain all of those individuals. And we had a heavy focus on training and reskilling and retooling of persons to be able to provide the service. So in the example of the Department of Transport, which is our proof of concept that I will speak to you a little later on, someone who was a clerk at the front desk, initially processing applications for persons walking into the department, these persons will now move to the back end where they would be processing applications that came in online. So, it was a matter of retooling and reskilling, and also ensuring that those persons have the necessary competencies to be able to provide the service using the technology as a tool. The other main area was the legal and regulatory functions. Initially, once we got the project moving, we looked at, there was an illegal and regulatory assessment where we focused on the existing legislation and what were the quick wins with regards to that for us to be able to get the system moving. So there were partial commencement recommendations which were taken up by the AG's chambers for the implementation of the Electronic Transactions Act. The Computer Misuse Act was commenced in 2018. And then we also went on to look at what were the requirements for the future, not just for the platform, but also looking at what would be best for St. Lucia within the digital transformation space, and how our legislation would support that. So since then, we've been able to draft a digital governance bill, a data sharing bill, and these two bills have been submitted to the AG's chambers for review. And that's important because we want to ensure that the legislation allows for things like cloud computing, checks, electronic checks, and etc. And just the ability for us to have data sharing across the different agencies that are part of the project. And we're going phase by phase. So every phase, there is a legal and regulatory review of the horizontal legislation or regulations that govern the operations of each of the agencies. And all of that also ties back to our digital ID, which we will be focusing on heavily during the implementation of the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project. So we have some legislation work also set aside within that project as well. A quick overview of the system. So we have the National Authentication Framework, which sits on top of 3 separate web portals. One would be the public-facing portal. The other would be the agency portal, where you have a lot of the management and administration of the system. And then you have the administrative portal, which focuses on the users and there's the configuration of the backend platform. Some of the common services would be the bill payments, the workflow, notifications, and just the engine that runs in the background to ensure that all of these services are available once somebody logs into the platform. And then there is the integration layer, which forms a major part of this project because we're integrating in several of the foundational systems within the government, and I will show you that in an upcoming couple slides. So as I indicated earlier, the Department of Transport is the proof of concept for the implementation of the digital identifier in St. Lucia. So what we first did was to go ahead and do an analysis of the data at the Department of Transport. In St. Lucia, we have approximately 53,000 drivers in St. Lucia. And we went ahead and we compared the data at Transport Department with that at the Electoral, the NIC, and the Civil Status Registry. In St. Lucia, the National Insurance, NICs for National Insurance Corporation, the national insurance number or your national insurance card is considered to be your national ID card. And so the national ID system, the National Insurance Corporation database has the largest cross-section of numbers that can be used, that currently is being used in St. Lucia to identify an individual. And so we wanted to compare that data to what exists at the Transport Department. And once we did that analysis, we came up with some interesting results. So there were 20% of the records had some sort of an anomaly, where you had duplicate NIC numbers because there was no integration between the transport system and the NIC. And essentially that exists right now across all of the major platforms within the government system. Some of the systems, some of the records did not match what was at the NIC. And then they also had persons with one name with 2 NICs and 2 NICs to 1 name. So it was a lot of irregular data that was found there. And we had to find a way to more or less rationalize that. And so what we did after that, discovering that information, was that we went through a process of elimination within the platform. So we invited persons to register for a driver's license with the existing information. But whatever data that was irregular, it was flagged. And at that point, persons would be required to present the supporting documents to show any changes that may have existed outside of the system, and to also address any irregularities within the system as well. So this is an ongoing process. As we said, the Transport Department is our proof of concept, but it has taken us to another chapter, another phase in the project, where we are now about to roll out the National Authentication Framework. And the government, though we have had a change of government recently, but there have been plans to roll out the National Health Management System, National Health Insurance System. And essentially it would require persons to register for health insurance. And it is we see that as our opportunity to use our National Authentication Framework to assist with persons registering for national health insurance. And we know everybody wants insurance, so we think that in that way we will get a larger cohort of persons coming in, and then we will be able to get real-time information from them. But at the same time, we'll be able to also do a further comparison of their information there as well. It is the intention for us to also capture some biometrics at that point, but then the legislation is being worked on to facilitate that capability or capacity. In this phase of the project, we will be integrating with the Civil Status Registry. The land registry system, it is currently, we're currently negotiating and having some internal discussions for the implementation of that land registry system as part of the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project. And the Registry of Companies, ROCIP, is also part of the DigiGov platform. So one or two of the other foundational systems are part of the DigiGov implementation, which would be electoral and the Registry of Companies. So we will just be missing one national database, which would be the land registry, for us to have a complete integration with all of the main systems within the government or within the society that allows persons to really interact with government. One thing I want to just note here as well is that this framework that we're building would allow us to integrate with the OECS regional project. And our initial framework for the National Authentication Framework Identifier actually was based on the structure from the multipurpose ID project that came out under the IGRI project. However, there has been some changes there, and once we have the go-ahead based on the selection of a vendor on the OECS project, we will then be able to utilize that same framework so that there will be commonality there, and it will be an easier process for integration with the OECS system. I thought it would be good to just give you a general idea of how the national authentication process would work, and just to give you an idea of one of the services that would be offered under the NAF. So the NAF authentication process is a very simple process. So a user would go on, would go on step one to request a service from a service provider. It could be DigiGov, or it could be another agency that's integrated with DigiGov. So the NAF could also be functioning as a NAF as a service to both internal government systems as well as to the private sector. So once somebody makes that request to the service provider, that request for authentication is sent to the National Authentication Framework Authentication Server. The server then allows the individual to log in. And once that is done, the person is authenticated by the server. And at that point, a token is sent to the service provider verifying the individual's identity. The service provider could also make a request for additional details on the user. And between step 5 and 6, there can be a loop here depending on how many services or how many resources that the individual has requested from the service provider. And once that is completed, step 7 takes more or less allows the service provider then grants that user access to the resources that they have made that request for. And so this essentially, by building the system that way, we are able to provide authentication as a service both to our internal stakeholders who are not part of the initial DigiGov project, but also to the private sector, to our banks, lending institutions, insurance companies, etc. I also wanted to describe a change process under the National Authentication Framework. So if somebody makes a request to change their information, that information change would be done through the NAF. So any name change, address change, these things would happen through the NAF, and then the NAF would then propagate that information to the other service providers so that they can then update their systems. So all of the interaction for a user or citizen or resident or visitor would resonate will be initiated, through the National Authentication Framework. So I'll go quickly to some of the expected challenges. Leadership, financial governance, budgetary allocation. I think we've all have had experiences fighting with the budget office, budget and finance for budget for our projects. The human resource capacity is very, very essential and very key. And this is one of the reasons why we're first looking internally to what skill sets that exist within government to rationalize and centralize our human resource capacity to ensure that we're able to meet the needs of our digital transformation process. Culture and change management, again, we know that by nature, human beings are resistant to change. However, we think through a lot of collaboration and discussion, persons can come on board and really be part of this process in a meaningful way. And we're actively pursuing our legal and regulatory changes that need to be done and to ensure that there are no impediments to the implementation of the platform. And just the environment, COVID has taught us a lot in the last couple of years, in the last 18 months, I should say. And I think for business continuity is how do we manage our data and where do we, and storage of the data. So we're actually pursuing now to have a backup data center that will be part of our Caribbean Digital Transformation Project next year. Again, this is so crucial as we move ahead. Political inconsistency, again, that's something that's a real challenge that I think we all face. Looks and Lucia, we just had a change of government, and so I'm very anxious to be able to present this project to the government and to get their support and buy-in as we go forward. And some lessons critical to success. One of the main ones that we focus on at this moment is the change management and how we align that change to the objectives of the project. That's very critical, and we've seen over the last 18 months since we launched last year on the 25th of June, how critical that is, because the platform works, but from time to time the types of issues that arise are because old habits die hard and people try to go back to some of the things that they knew from before, and so it is a continuous process, and that leadership there is at every level. When we say leadership, it doesn't mean that, hey, it has to be the Prime Minister or myself or the Permanent Secretary, but the persons within the departments, that leadership must be seen, and persons must have that buy-in to ensure that there is support and persons understand their role within the process. So moving forward, I didn't get a chance to speak about the SBA. The SBA is actually a service bureau agent. And this is a concept that comes directly as a result of the project. And so we also have a concept of a grassroots system for a service bureau agent, where we're going to be more or less trying to create some employment through the platform. So it's not only about the value-added services where we engage the private sector to provide connectivity into the platform, but for an SBA, somebody can choose to learn all of the services that are on the platform, and they could now be a service bureau agent where they assist persons to apply for the government service within their own space. Right, because as we spoke earlier about connectivity, inclusion, and we know these gaps still exist, and then as a result of that, we see the service bureau agent as someone who could really help with the uptake and to ensure that there is digital inclusion once we go forward. The National Authentication Office, again, as part of our governance process, we're going to have an office specific for persons to come in to register onto the platform and for them to get that digital ID that we speak about. NAF as a service, again, as we said, once we are matured and we have a critical number of persons on the platform, we will be able to provide this as a service to both our internal and external stakeholders. And we're looking forward to the opportunities once it lends itself to integrate with the OECS systems. Once this becomes a reality. Key to the project, I know I mentioned it earlier, is the value-added services. Again, this is a driver for the economic activity and just the digital economy that we speak about. And DigiGov will be the catalyst for that in many, many ways. And we've included some funding under the World Bank project for us to be able to really use that concept to engage the private sector so that they can build and connect apps into the DigiGov platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marlon. This was a really, really interesting presentation. I have a number of questions and comments. Just before we get into Dr. Henry's presentation, I just want to comment on a few things. I really like the tagline. I think it's creative, serving people and business with that island love, you know, that tagline. And I think it makes the technology relevant to the people, and it's creating a link between the services and the culture, and it's tied into the culture. You spoke about culture, the whole issue of cultural barriers, and I'll probably have a question later on at the end in terms of how you know some of those challenges were dealt with and addressed. The issue of retooling, I think, is very important. I have a question on that. You know, how we would have dealt with that. And just to end before we move into the next presentation, I really like the idea of the National Authentication Framework, because I think that's an excellent strategy for adoption and onboarding ID users and dealing with all the core issues, deduplication and all of those issues, and ensuring uniqueness and having that governance framework in place to deal with the core issues. And yet still linking the framework to the broader space of digital transformation. And the notion of the pilot from the Ministry of Transport or the Division of Transport, linking that in preparation as a forerunner to the OECS broader digital digital transformation plan. So it's really comprehensive, well thought out, and really well planned. And I think it's an excellent model for us to learn from across the region. Very good, very good. So now I would ask Dr. Clarence Henry, to share with us the OECS. It's really timely to hear now about the OECS after we heard from St. Lucia. So Dr. Henry, floor is yours.
Okay, good morning to every one of you. Certainly, I must first start by congratulating my fellow countryman, Marlon, for this, what I consider to be a very good presentation. And I listened very keenly because I know the experience of St. Lucia would be invaluable to what we're doing at the regional level, but more specifically as well in helping to pull the other member states that are behind in that kind of process, and give them the opportunity to learn from what St. Lucia has done, so that they too can also get to the level of development where it pertains to digital government services, and of course digital ID as well. So with that said, so my name is Clarence Henry, Senior Technical Officer, Regional Integration. I want to also indicate here that, you know, we at the OECS Commission are very grateful to be given the opportunity to make this presentation this morning, because I think it's an opportunity to increase public awareness, but as well overall awareness of what we're trying to do with respect to the OECS ID. And it's certainly it's an opportunity that our Director General, Dr. Jules, would always consider to be critical to our implementation process. So I just wanted to give those initial opening remarks before I go into the presentation. So let me put this into presentation mode. So we're talking about the OECS identification system, and there is much talk about a digital process has been central to the OECS identification system. So this presentation would really speak to the intention of the OECS Commission with respect to the OECS ID, and particularly highlight specifically how we seek to approach its implementation. So essentially, the order of presentation for us here would be, and again, we always want to take the opportunity to speak to who we are. So who we are as a regional organization, intergovernmental organization, and then go specifically into the meat of the matter. Why do we need an OECS ID, be it digital or otherwise? Where are we now with implementation of OECS identification systems? Particularly, where are the national systems at the moment with respect to their own level of development? And then, of course, very importantly, how do we plan to implement the OECS ID? And then I will give some closing remarks and thoughts in terms of what we consider to be very critical for successful implementation of the project. So let me just speak a little about who we are, because I think, like I said, it's always important that persons appreciate the OECS. Sometimes we get mixed with CARICOM, and some persons may incorrectly assume that OECS is a subset of CARICOM. Actually, the OECS is an intergovernmental organization which is separate and apart from CARICOM, although of course, because we share same member states or similar member states, with the exception of the French member states, that are not member states of CARICOM. And we also share similar objectives in seeking to improve the capacity of small island developing states within the Caribbean to address critical national objectives such as growth, development areas, social stability, and these days enhancement in their capacity to deal with climate change and other related challenges to their sustainable development. So the OECS, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, established initially through the Treaty of Bastia in 1981 and continues through the revised Treaty of Bastia signed in 2010, which established the Economic Union, is really made up of 11 member states. And for the interest of time, I wouldn't highlight the member states, but this slide gives you a sense of the region of the Caribbean area that represents the OECS, from Anguilla up in the north all the way down to Grenada in the south northern part of Trinidad and Tobago. And just very quickly, often persons make the error that there is a difference between OECS and the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. There isn't. The OECS is the organization, and within that organization, there is a governance structure which speaks to the OECS authority, which includes the heads of government, the Economic Affairs Council, which is the principal organ for establishing the Economic Union, the Council of Ministers, the OECS Assembly, and of course the OECS Commission. And within the OECS Commission is a secretariat which provides the support for implementing the actions and mandates provided by the organs, the other organs. And the institutions itself, there are 3 institutions: the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, the Eastern Caribbean Civil Aviation Authority, really showing and demonstrating the benefits of functional cooperation in a way that we can pool resources, human resources, capital, and other form resources in order to meet common objectives and goals, and to do it very well as well, become really example of success in small island developing states, and of course, initiatives that definitely can benefit other developing countries. ECTEL, which is critical to what we are doing in terms of improving our capacity within the the telecommunications space is not exactly defined as an institution, but can be considered down the road as an institution of the OECS. But of course, ECTEL serves serves as many as 5 of the member states of the OECS as the authority for telecommunications. So having said that, I'm just gonna go through this quickly. You also do appreciate that the OECS has, through the revised Treaty of Basta in 2010, established an economic union, which we call the Eastern Caribbean Economic Union, with several objectives. So this slide just really speaks to on the left, the original objectives of the organization, and on the right, under the economic union, speak of the 8 key objectives. I think I only highlight 5 here, generally. 8 key objectives that the economic union is seeking to bring about. So having dealt with that, just so that you know who we are and you appreciate the mandate of the OECS as an intergovernmental organization, this hopefully will give greater clarity into why is the OECS seeking to champion the cause for an OECS ID system. Where does this fit within the broader regional integration objective of the organization? How does it really improve the capacity of the member states moving forward, especially in line with the desire to improve global competitiveness, in line with the desire to have increased economic growth and sustainable development, and improving, of course, access to broad social and economic services by the government. So let me first speak to the whole notion of the ID system. And this process and this particular project, the OECS ID, came out of the need to review or revisit the multi-purpose identification system, the MPID, which was a component of the IGRIP. And we recognize that while the 4 member states that were part of this process, of course, Marlon would have highlighted in that regard St. Lucia's role. So St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Grenada and the Commonwealth of Dominica, part of this IGRIP project, with the MPID being a central component of that. And the expectation was that the MPID would have given rise to the issuance of a unique identifier number that would have been issued from birth and terminated upon death. And so central to that process would have been the role of the civil registration agencies in that regard, and of course the Department of Health, certainly Health Information Services. And so the expectation of the process is that you would have enrollment, you would then have verification, and then you would issue the ID number, the unique ID number, as well as under the MPID, the focus was on also the issuance of a card, a well-designed card, MPID card, that could then be used for both national and regional purposes. So this project is still built on this basic promise of having an improved national ID system of enrollment verification and an effective issuance process. So we're not moving away from what MPID would have required member states to do. So essentially, this slide would highlight the expectation that we would seek to continue to support member states to build effective foundations for the identification of persons, with a focus on strengthening population registers or certainly resident registers of some kind, improving the functions of the civil registry responsible for ensuring that all the vital events of birth, death, marriage, divorce, etc., are effectively dealt with, which at the moment is in fact being dealt with by all of the member states that we are speaking about. And then, of course, the requirement that there is this level of interoperability with the foundational system that we speak about, civil registry, the population registry, and that of functional systems, and listening to Marlon speak, we know that within government services, you need to get a social security ID as you seek to enter the labor market to begin to build a career and to contribute to the economic activity from a standpoint of being a worker, gain access to a driver's license so that you can legitimately take advantage of the opportunity to own a car, to utilize the road services, to get a passport so that you are effectively able to travel across borders, to access social safety nets, and so on and so forth. So that's the expectation. So we recognize that the MPID, although given the value that the MPID was expected to bring about, the MPID was not sufficiently successfully implemented within the 4 member states. And in 2019, we did an initial assessment of what had gone wrong with the MPID implementation. And we thought that perhaps one of the things that we need to do in revisiting the MPID is to, 1, re-examine the name, and then to do a deeper dive into the reality on the ground with member states. What's going on with the registration process, the civil registration processes, and the issuance of IDs within the member states that are benefiting from this project, that may in fact explain why it is that the MPID process was not so successful initially. And so last year we would have engaged a consultant, NRDAS, Norway Registers Development, in exploring this issue for us and to develop what we refer to as an action plan for moving forward. What NRDAS would have found initially, and this slide speaks to it, is that within the foundational systems, while there exists well-developed processes, the process had not been digitalized, that no population registry or residential registry had been in place, and that for sure, while we had under the MPID established what the unique ID number and structure would be, there was absolutely no unique number being issued, apart from, of course, in the case of Grenada, where there would have been some issuance, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, where I believe about 5,000 persons would have been issued the unique ID number during the MPID process. It was also noted that we needed to explore more deeply the legal, policy, and technological reality on the ground. In recognizing that, 1, there needed to be integration between the foundational systems and the foundational and functional ID systems, and that we needed to explore much deeper the whole issue of biometric, collecting biometric information. Though, of course, they recognize that countries, for instance, that are currently issuing e-passports, like St. Vincent and Grenadines, would be collecting some biometrics. But of course, that is in itself not connected with the civil registry process. And then we needed to explore where the legal framework is at the moment, in identifying that to be able to strengthen the ID system nationally and to create this regional project called OECS ID system, we needed a strengthened legislative framework. And I was very happy to hear Marlon speak about a lot of the work that they've done under DigiGov in exploring the legal framework and improving the legal framework in that regard. And I think this is one of the areas that are very critical to the success of this project. Notwithstanding the fact that under MPID, you had, of course, 6 pieces of legislation Marlon would have referred to several of them, the electronic transaction, electronic crime, data protection, were all pieces of legislation that would have been put together under the MPID, but many of the member states would have either not enacted the legislation, or in some cases, you would have had enactment, but the legislation would not have commenced. And so effectively, many of the member states, the 4 member states that I'm speaking about, would not have advanced their legal framework. And I think St. Lucia would be one of the, among the 4 countries, the most advanced in terms of strengthening its legal framework for digital, for the ID system, for the digital ID system. Grenada perhaps not too far behind St. Lucia in that regard. And one last thing, the NRDAS would have highlighted the importance of governance structure, strengthening governance structure, because now you're not only talking about a national ID system that is being strengthened, but also the creation of an integration layer that would allow for interoperability across borders. And so consequently, there's need for strengthening the governance structure or framework that would allow for effective cross-border interoperability and sharing of the data on citizens. And so what is it that we expect the OECS ID then to do once we're able to implement that project? The OECS ID digital system is really about citizens, about residents, it's about families, it's about businesses. It's about how do we, across border, strengthen citizens, businesses, residents' access to educational services, to healthcare services, to land registry services, to immigration services, and I'll come back to immigration shortly, to financial services. One of the challenges we've had within the economic union is how do you effectively and with ease set up a bank account? Now that, don't get me wrong, is quite efficient in my view within the ECCU, the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, part of course the OECS. However, many a times you have the challenge where persons are unable to move ahead very quickly because they need more than one pieces of ID. Now, what is the OECS ID system would do with the fact that the ID system will be built on the issuance of a unique ID that then captures other identification that will be issued to citizens and to residents over their lifetime. It would allow for just this singular use of an ID number to allow for access to, for instance, finance. Border crossing points, very critical, because in more recent times we recognize that as our countries face climate change impact, such as major hurricanes, there exists the possibility of persons, and in fact, we have gone beyond the possibility because we did see the experience of Hurricane Maria in 2017, where several and hundreds of Dominicans were forced to move across border into St. Lucia, into St. Vincent and Grenadines, into Antigua and Barbuda, and elsewhere within the Caribbean and CARICOM space, OECS and CARICOM space, without official documentation, because in many cases they move in a hurry, so they couldn't necessarily compile their passport or collect their ID, or in some cases completely lost because of the devastation of the hurricane. One thing here, though, is that with cross-border interoperability within the system, it is expected that in times like these, our immigration officials, our border officials will be better able to identify persons moving under distress situations or scenarios due to a climate change event or natural event that requires quick and swift movement from one of our member states to the next. And so that is the central and the core reason why the OECS ID system is being attempted at this point in time. Now, in the action plan developed by NRDAS, we would have identified 7 key action areas for implementation, to support implementation. Developing national implementation plans, very critical, because what we've recognized is that across the board, the 4 member states that are initial beneficiaries of this project are not at the same level. St. Lucia is moving, full speed ahead, and we're very much supportive and happy for the progress that we see in St. Lucia. But while we say this, Dominica, St. Vincent, and Grenadines are somewhat behind the progress. And the same may be said for Grenada. And so consequently, the national implementation plans need to take into account where each member states are at the moment with implementation process of the national ID systems. There's need for a governance framework. I spoke about that earlier. Conceptual design in terms of what exactly do we mean by the OECS ID? What do we want from the OECS ID? Technical solution, what will that, and of course that goes along the lines of the conceptual design. So what are the technical solutions that we're looking for? The legal framework. So as we speak, we have in draft a terms of reference for a legal officer or legal legislative drafter or firm to support us in drafting what we call an OECS ID model bill. And that bill will factor in where each of the member states are in the process of improving their legal framework, and to propose a framework that would strengthen data protection, that would strengthen the collection of biometrics in particular, that would certainly in some countries give teeth to institutional arrangements for advancing ID implementation, as in some member states that currently does not exist. In addition to that, it was identified that public advocacy is a challenge. And we recognize, and public advocacy is a major challenge. And I think we cannot downplay public advocacy issues, because clearly within the context of COVID-19 and the desire to get people to get vaccinated, we do recognize how important public advocacy is. When we did the assessment of the MPID, and we asked the question, why was it that so few persons got enrolled in MPID? We recognized that one of the issues that faced member states at the time was the fact that the public did not appreciate or understand why it is I need to give my fingerprints to be issued and be enrolled in a system. What benefit does it have to me? In Grenada, when we did the assessment, people referred to it as a mark of the beast, and consequently would not support such a process. So we also therefore have a TOR in draft form looking at the procurement of a public relation company or firm that will support us in building the messaging and the interaction and the discussion that is required to get the public on board and to understand that when it comes to the final part of the action plan, the onboarding of the population, that we have greater awareness, and not only that, that citizens will accept and understand the value for them, for their family members, for themselves, for businesses in moving forward with a project such as the OECS ID. So very quickly, that is conceptually what we're trying to do, building the national systems and then having a cross-border integration layer that allow for the interoperability of citizen information across the member states. Now, in summary, what's the critical issues here and the main points that I want to bring across that defines this project? One, we're seeking to improve national ID systems. We're seeking to strengthen the IT solution, but with contemporary IT solutions that meet the key OECS ID objectives, improves cross-border interoperability, open source concept, so that as we move along, we should be able to make the necessary upgrades to the system without challenges, include other member states to benefit from the cross-border benefits of the OECS ID system. And we don't have issues such as the loss of the source code and the challenges that St. Vincent, for instance, and Dominica had with the MPID, where they could not do the necessary adjustments to the system because they had no access to the source code. And then, of course, strengthening the legal framework for ID issuance, ensuring that provisions for data protection, data privacy, etc., are all included. And above all, implementation has to be people-centered, and so extensive consultation of the expected benefits to be done, and ensuring that ultimately the system that we have allows for individual control of their data, which is very, very critical in moving forward. So with that said, thanks again for the opportunity to engage on this matter and to move swiftly to supporting the whole idea of increasing awareness on what we're trying to do with the OECS.
Thank you very much, Dr. Henry. Again, a really excellent presentation, really crystallizing the core issues here. I just want to say that I'll ask Marlon if he can come back on screen, please. Let's turn his camera on. As we're going to move into some feedback at this point, but just to say that the CTU, we have been in discussions, we are actually in discussions with the OECS, talking about the whole notion of digital IDs and ensuring that linkages are set up and established with the OECS and the rest of the region to ensure that the OECS ID is mutually recognized by other territories. So we're working with the OECS and we're working as well as beyond the OECS. And thank you very much for Dr. Henry for the clarification in terms of the context of the OECS, the structure, and who the OECS really is, so we have a clear idea of the role and how we continue. I think the CTU knows that, but I think across the region, sometimes it's really misunderstood. I like the idea of the OECS exposing the larger governance issues surrounding, and I think Marlon touched on that, the larger governance issues surrounding the implementation of national digital identity systems. And those things, it's not just the technology, a number of issues around that. In particular, I really like the OECS ID model bill that allows for capturing of biometrics. That is really key. That is critical because the biometrics will play a really important part, a critical part in the foundation IDs in terms of dealing with issues like deduplication and ensuring uniqueness. And so that is a major, and it's something we can learn from across the region. So that's excellent. And the last thing you said there is also intriguing, Dr. Henry, about the issue of open source options. And again, we at the CTU having discussions with the OECS and with other countries about looking at exploring open source options that are available. So all those we are really in sync, and I really want to, again, thank the team for their presentations. Just to say, before we get into the discussions, just to share a bit on the CTU and what we have done so far to contribute to our members, the OECS and all our members, that we had, well, we have been working with them. There was a handbook, a digital ID handbook that was developed by the CTU, looking at references from the World Bank and the ITU, but it was designed and developed in the context of the region. We shared that with our members. We actually shared it with the working group for the Caribbean single ICT space, and so that is also another reference, a source of reference. I think we probably put up the link somewhere on the website and share the link with everyone. And so we also follow up on that. We also had a digital ID workshop where we had a number of the OECS countries, a number of countries, as would have been on the 16th of March. We also had the CTO representatives, that's the Commonwealth Telecoms organizations. We also had representations from CARICAD as well. And that workshop was also interesting, where we looked at the core issues that surround the implementation of digital IDs. We did an assessment and an evaluation of the ecosystem. And so a lot of work is happening, a lot of things are going on and stuff, and we just want to share that with everyone. So at this point, I will just open for questions. I'm sure we have a lot of questions and comments, and I am not seeing anything in the...
There are a couple on the chat.
Okay, right, let me see. All right, I'm seeing a question here that I believe that is the first one. It's a question from YouTube to Marlon. What platform is being used to develop this system and framework? How can local IT practitioners leverage those developers to assist in the provision of services to the business sector? So I believe it's the National Authentication Framework. I'm assuming it's that framework the question is referring to. So Marlon, over to you.
Thank you very much. As I mentioned in the presentation, there will be an opportunity for the private sector to directly integrate into DigiGov, not only for the ID component, but to provide additional support to some of the services that will be provided on the platform. So just off the bat, there will be requirements for mobile apps. So the DigiGov mobile app that is deliberately has not been developed as part of this project so that we can engage the private sector to undertake that process. Some integration with requirements as well once we get to the next phase of the project, and some system development support as well. So for example, we will soon be on the market for a developer to assist us with developing the electronic version of the driver's license examination. So right now you still have to go to transport to sit in a room and do your exam. We want to make this a completely electronic process. So we're in the process now of developing the requirements for that. And we're hoping that we could utilize some of the funding through the World Bank to help support the actual procurement of a vendor to undertake that development. That would be solely to the private sector in St. Lucia, so that they can then benefit from that type of activity under the DigiGov platform. Again, as I indicated, mobile app development as well. The main reason that we have not taken that next step as yet, one, is because we needed to get the funding, and with the funding is coming out of the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project, the component 3 of that project. And two, we did not have the number of services available on the platform at the point in time. So we now have 17 services on the platform. They are all transport driver's license related. The next step on the agenda is for us to have civil status registry services. So within the next 2 months, persons will be able to apply for a birth certificate, a death certificate online. And then we're going into the registry of companies where persons can register, etc., for business types of services. So once we have a critical number of services on there, we will then be able to engage the private sector so that they can plug into the platform.
Yeah, I really like that, Marlon. I'm really excited about it.
If I might ask, is it a proprietary or an open source platform that is?
You're muted, Marlon.
Yes, it's proprietary. However, it is very modular and agnostic. So we are able to provide a lot of integration, APIs, etc., onto the platform. It was the development requirements were specific so that we could allow for a lot of integration through specific APIs that will be provided to the private sector, depending on what the integration model is like or required. So even in the start, for example, moving from the old transport database to the new one, to the DigiGov, we had to hire somebody to do integration for us. That was done separate to the project team for the actual development of the DigiGov platform. So it is really a proof of concept that is going from cradle right up, from genesis and integration.
Yeah, and that's what I like, because you see, we have to realize that the entire region is not a homogeneous space. So we're not all going to have the same platforms and stuff. While there might be a focus on open source, or there might be a focus on a particular, approach. The thing is that we need to ensure that we have open APIs. Whatever we do and whatever we develop, those systems are interoperable and open and accessible, especially to, and the point I was going to make, to local developers, indigenous developers. So you can have, develop your local pool of skills and talents, and develop the sector in a broader sense, the ICT sector. And so I like that approach, and I'm really heartened to hear that that you're looking for developers to develop services, applications All right, and yeah, there's a space for developers. Yes, firms as well, but there are spaces for experts, developers, that the talent that we have in the region that we want to nurture, which would in fact redound to the benefit of the ICT sector. So excellent. We have another.
Junior, if I could just add one thing to that as well. As part of our negotiations for the World Bank project, we also included a co-working space, and that is for us to also identify those skills that are out there that is unknown. So we're going to be providing persons with training, and then we're going to use the co-working spaces to recruit the top performers within those cohorts and allow them to provide us with services as well, support, development support. We're looking at mobile apps, we're looking at graphic design, database development. So these persons within that working space, and they will be getting a stipend as well, but they would also be providing a service to government, helping us solve a problem and a solution.
Yeah, and I recall that, Marlon, we recall the CASIP project. I think it would have started there, that model, and now it's maturing.
Yes. So we're going a step further than the CASIP.
Very good.
Training, yeah.
Good. Excellent that we're hearing about this. Okay, let me just get into the next question. We have a question for both Marlon and Clarence. So the question is, would you comment about the spaces available for civil society participation and input in the design of the digital ID project? We get a lot of questions from civil society, so I hope you have a lot to say about it. Well, we go with Clarence first, Dr. Henry, and then Marlon.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think, we would have learned from the MPID process that public advocacy is important. So what we've done overall throughout the action plan development, we would have had 2 webinar sessions last year to allow for some level of participation from the citizens across the OECS, the Caribbean, to air their views and provide some perspective, which the consultant would have taken on board in making recommendations in the action plan for us to move forward. As part of the public advocacy element of it, which we're now trying to advance in getting a firm to help us, we do expect to go out and have some broader discussions with key civil groups, for instance, so that they appreciate what we're trying to do. What I'm not sure though is that it's very likely by the time we go out into the public on that phase of the project, we would also be advancing the technology. So there may not necessarily be an opportunity to do it at this stage. But what we've learned though, having said this, is that persons have a broader interest or concern as it pertains to who controls their data. And so we've recognized that there's need to have a system that allows for a significant degree of individual control of their data. So that is one of the adjustments that we've done from prior conversations and discussions. But certainly the broad conversation with civil society, with citizens, are still important, even as we seek to implement, because again, if we can't get the buy-in in terms of why is this thing beneficial to them, because remember, persons have to enroll, persons have to provide their biometrics. And there's nothing that mandates that you must enroll and you must provide the biometrics. So I think for now, that is where we are at. But we continue to accept comments and feedback from our citizens. And that obviously will be taken on board as we deal with the implementation issues.
Thank you very much. Let me just go over to Marlon to respond as well. Very good.
Yes, thank you very much, Junior. 2 things. As I indicated earlier, our intention is to piggyback on the health insurance rollout, and the public, the PR on that would have taken place there on one end. On the legal and regulatory aspect as well, the legislation to support that also has to go up the chain. And one of the processes there is also public consultation as well. So it would have worked both from the technical side, looking at how we, what other activities of government that are happening to support our intentions, but also directly through discussions and consultations on the legal and regulatory aspect, which would be the most important part, which would more or less influence how the technical component is done. But at the same time, though, because of the types of services that we're offering on DigiGov, persons are already registering onto the platform because they now can connect for application of the driver's license and several of the other driver's license related services. And so that is why at the start of the project, we ensured that at least there was the horizontal legislation that would support the project going forward. This is why we had the partial commencement of our Electronic Transactions Act. We saw the commencement of the computer crimes. And also we've been having lots of discussion with the AG's chambers on the data protection. We also included some of the data protection principles as part of our digital government bill, because we thought it was important for us to at least in the interim have some of those data principles attached to the digital government bill, considering that the recommendation from the consultant was for us to repeal and replace the existing Data Protections Act. So I think there was a lot of, we've done a lot, but then there's a lot to be done, and we're ensuring that through this process, there would be a lot of public consultation on exactly how this is going to go forward.
Yes, excellent feedback. I think we have one more question. Another question, and actually two, but I think that one of the questions would have been addressed. It's, will blockchain technology be used to enhance the security of the NAF? I suppose, Marlon, that question will be for you.
Yes, it actually is. And I had a slide on that earlier in my first iteration of the presentation, but I actually removed it. We have blockchain is part of the implementation of the NAF as well. Yes.
Very good, great. Okay, we just have a few more. There's another question here. And I think that would have been addressed, but I'll ask it, I guess, for clarity. And that will be directed to Clarence. What lessons are being learned from the MPID experience as we move towards OECS ID initiative? I think you would have touched it, but the user may not have.
You know, that's the MPID?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yes, certainly. Again, it was quite fruitful, and I mean, Marlon would have participated in that process when we had the one-day consultation with key stakeholders from each of the member states in 2019, just so that we appreciate why we didn't move more successfully with the MPID. And several things came up. Of course, the legal issues came up. You had the bills, but the bills didn't really move towards enactment on time. But that was on one hand. I think one of the key things that came out had to do with the fact that both Dominica and Grenada and Dominica and St. Vincent and Grenadines had issues with the source code. And we appreciated that moving forward, we needed to have some sort of open source system, but also with member states having control of the source code, so that you do not experience this challenge a second time. So that's one of the things. We recognize that enrollment was low, but when we spoke of the extent to which public advocacy or communication strategy was built in the MPID system, perhaps wasn't adequate. And so we recognize in this new system, we need to have a very robust public advocacy campaign. That's one of the reasons why, you know, once we invited to make a presentation on what we're trying to do, I'm quickly to say yes, and let's see what we can do so persons understand. So again, so we're looking at this procurement of the public, the PR firm to help us with that. That is already in train. And we also recognize that beyond building a national system and having a unique identifier that's, of course, been issued by all of the member states, we needed an integration layer, because a lot of the talking around this issue was centered among the 4 countries. And we have 11 member states, 7 protocol economic union, but 4 associate member states, the French territories, as well as Anguilla and the BVI. And we recognize that if this system has value for the 4 countries, it automatically has value for all of the other countries. And so we need a robust integration layer that brings in the other countries into the system, which would not have been there conceptually under the MPI. So I think these are the key differences, I would say, and what we've learned from MPID implementation.
Very clear. I realize Nigel has his hand up, and I know we're out of time, so I'll hand over to you and you'll ask your question.
Yes, I would. And actually, my question related to what Clarence was saying just now. It's taken a little further beyond the OECS now, because we have in the Caribbean this vision of a single ICT space, and the CTU is working towards that vision. So, and what we're trying to do is kind of build consensus around the whole Caribbean for us to maybe take common approaches to digital ID, or work together, collaborate with respect to digital ID. So from your experience in St. Lucia and OECS and so on, if you had to advise us as to maybe how to take that message to the rest of the Caribbean, or what to suggest to the rest of the Caribbean might facilitate the sort of integration that we're looking for, are there any specific things you could offer us now? Any specific thoughts? Whether it's an approach to a technology approach, or whatever, a legal approach, anything at all. Just keeping in mind that single ICT space vision.
Yeah, well, I will probably start off with something that is not novel in a sense. I think we recognize that the legal framework defines a lot of things that we're moving forward. And so, for instance, where we have started with a model bill, that can easily be applied to any of the other Caribbean countries. You just pretty much apply to your local situation, but the core elements of the bill would remain the same. So that's the one thing I would suggest from the standpoint of a legal standpoint. The other thing I think, and integration processes, I think a lot of it has to do with messaging, because there are a lot we can do, but part of the challenge is political will to get it done. To get that ICT space, effectively implemented, you need to get the member states, the governments, to believe that it is useful for them now, and that it is part and parcel of their critical response to the current environment. And I think there needs to be an appreciation that creating one single economic space is beyond just that of a treaty. It's about access. How does someone in Trinidad and Tobago access services in Antigua and Barbuda within the CSME? And the same applies to all the other member states. We need this sort of system that allows for greater access. And with greater access, you will have greater involvement in the economic arrangement, and potentially each member state will see greater economic benefits coming to them. So I think so the messaging, I think, is that maybe the first part of it actually beyond the legal, so that one appreciate why do it? Why is it important to do now, as opposed to several of the other national priorities and maybe regional priorities that we have? I think messaging is critical to move forward.
Any other thoughts, Marlon?
Yes, well, I fully support what Clarence is saying. But if one of the things that I also think is that we must also show the value to the stakeholders, and also try to meet them where they are. So this is one of the reasons why the proof of concept on our project is the driver's license platform, because the majority of your citizenry that interact with government wouldn't have a driver's license or have a requirement for a driver's license. And St. Lucia is particular we have a phenomenon here where plenty young people, that is their first course of action, is to apply for a learner's permit to get a driver's license. And so we saw that as identifying a high valued service, and then using that high value service against the need of the citizenry to really engage them and to get them on board. And this is why we see in the level of usage and uptake of the platform. I can give you some quick stats. We have over 6,000 persons registered at this point, with over 20,000 transactions, with only 17 services. And the majority of that would have been for renewal of driver's license, and as well as the application for permits as well. We see that as one of the other things. One other aspect as well would also be to develop credibility throughout the process. The credibility aspect is very, very key. And one of the things that we've done, again, just through that credibility that we've been able to develop over the last 18 months, is to the point now that we're about to launch our digital vaccine certificate for St. Lucia. And so, that again would drive more persons, more excitement, more activity to the platform. And that in itself would help drive more buy-in. So when we come to the point where, hey, the national authentication framework has to be implemented, the biometrics would be a component of that. Persons would have already, through that goodwill that we've developed over the last couple of months or a year and a half, to see, okay, this is a legitimate process, this is a legitimate system that the government has put in place, and I can trust it. And so I think that would resonate across the region, across the island individually, but then, that would also allow for persons to be more comfortable in sharing data with government. Yeah, I think Clarence mentions in Grenada, it was, some people say mark of the beast and all of that. Yes. COVID is the mark of the beast as well, so, the messaging is so important, and the credibility has to come forth. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, folks. Junior, Marlon, and Clarence. Thanks for this session. I think it was quite informative, and it takes us a bit further along the path that we want to tread in terms of digital ID and regional integration. Is some of the thoughts I think we can take into account when we making some policy proposals and in our internet governance policy framework and so on. So we are really a little past the lunchtime, the scheduled lunchtime. So I think I'll leave it there for the time being. Let me just say thanks to all the presenters this morning, in particular the four from A4AI and yourselves as just thanked. Invite you as well to come back this afternoon, and we'll restart at 1:30. This is scheduled time, where we will hear again this afternoon from the internet organizations. In particular, ICANN will feature this afternoon, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, telling us about some of the current issues before them, that especially the ones of Caribbean interest, where input from the Caribbean would serve our best interest. So we'll start that at 1:30. We'll then get another discussion from the internet organizations, ICANN, ARIN, LACNIC, and ISOC, talking about collaborative approaches or mechanisms that they have in mind going forward for the benefit of the Caribbean region. And then we will look for your specific inputs back to us in terms of carrying the whole Caribbean internet governance process forward in the open mic. So you're invited back at 1:30. Thank you very much, folks, for the morning session, and we will break now. See you soon.